Hello, dear friends. So glad you could join us at Harry What If. Today's narrative adventure is titled What If Narcissa Malfoy Left Everything Behind and Fell in Love with Harry Potter. We put our heart into every story we share. If you appreciate our work, showing some love with a like and subscribe would make our day. The story begins now. Chapter 1, The fallen snow rain lashed against the windows of Malfoy Manor, matching Narcissa's mood as she wandered through empty hallways. 3 years after the war, and still the silence felt unnatural. No house elves scurrying about, no Lucius in his study, no Draco's footsteps overhead. Just her and the rain and memories that refused to fade. She paused at the drawing room door, the same room where the Dark Lord had once held court, where that Granger girl had screamed under Bella's wand. Narcissa hadn't set foot in it since the war ended. Some spaces shouldn't be revisited. Enough, she muttered, turning away. Wallowing won't change anything. The manor was falling apart around her. Selling off heirlooms had kept the worst creditors at bay, but the maintenance charms were failing, and rooms had been sealed off one by one as the damp spread. The ministry had taken almost everything in reparations, leaving just enough that she wasn't completely destitute, a calculated cruelty, she thought. Not enough to live as a Malfoy, but too much to claim true hardship. Narcissa checked her watch, nearly time. She'd received an owl that morning from Draco, the first in months. He was coming to visit, and for once, the manor's gloom had lifted slightly at the prospect of seeing her son. She hurried to the small parlor where she now spent most of her time, the only room she could properly heat. A tap of her wand lit the lamps, and another conjured fresh flowers for the table. Small magics, but they took more effort these days. The manor's wards drained her, constantly demanding magical energy she could ill afford to spare. The flue flared green exactly on time. Draco had always been punctual. Mother. He stepped through, immaculately dressed in tailored robes that spoke of new money rather than old. The dragonhide boots and gold cufflinks would have made Lucius sneer, but Narcissa noted they were perfect for the young entrepreneur Draco had reinvented himself as. Draco. She embraced him, felt him stiffen before awkwardly returning the gesture. You look well. You look tired, he said bluntly, stepping back to examine her. This place is draining you. It's nothing I can't handle. She gestured to the tea service. Shall we? They sat, and for several minutes conversation remained painfully polite, his work in importing specialized potions ingredients, the mild winter they were having, how Pansy and Blaze were doing in France. Nothing about Lucius in Azkaban. Nothing about the weekly howlers that still arrived. Nothing about the way the manor's magic was failing as the Malfoy line withered. Mother, Draco finally said, setting down his cup with deliberate care, I've come to discuss something important. I've purchased property in Geneva. The business is expanding, and international connections are essential now. Narcissa nodded slowly, already sensing where this was heading. I want you to come with me, he continued. Leave this mausoleum behind. Start fresh where our name doesn't instantly close doors. Leave Malfoy Manor. The very thought was almost incomprehensible. This has been my home for 25 years. It's killing you, Draco said flatly. Look at yourself. Your magic is half what it was, supporting these ancient wards. For what? So you can rattle around alone in a decaying monument to a family name nobody respects anymore. His words stung because they held truth. And what of your father? When he's released, if he's released, Draco corrected. And if that happens, he can make his own choices. Mother, I've rebuilt something from the ashes. I've had to work 10 times harder than anyone else, swallow my pride daily, prove myself constantly. I've created a future for myself, for us, but you have to be willing to leave the past behind. Narcissa looked away. I don't know who I am if not Lady Malfoy. That's precisely the problem. Draco's voice softened. You were Narcissa Black before you were ever Narcissa Malfoy. Perhaps it's time to rediscover who that woman was. The conversation circled for another hour. Draco outlined his plans, described the villa he'd purchased with its views of Lake Geneva, explained the international connections that made Switzerland ideal for his business ventures. Everything perfectly logical, perfectly planned. When he left, promising to return in a week for her answer, Narcissa stood alone in the parlor. She caught her reflection in a tarnished silver mirror, pale, thin, with shadows beneath her eyes that no glamour charm quite concealed. When had she grown so old? Narcissa Black, she whispered to her reflection, testing the name like an unfamiliar spell. It felt foreign on her tongue after so many years. Sleep eluded her that night. Draco's words echoed through her mind as she tossed and turned. Leave the manor. Leave England. Abandon the identity she'd cultivated for decades. Start anew at nearly 50. The thought was terrifying. And yet, beneath the fear lurked something else, a flicker of possibility she hadn't felt in years. Morning found her in Lucius's study, methodically sorting through papers. If she were to leave, just hypothetically, she told herself, there were matters to address. The manor's entailment. Her personal accounts, separate from the family vaults. The jewelry she'd brought to the marriage as part of her dowry. A knock at the door startled her from her task. No one ever called at the manor anymore, the wards were set to admit only family, and the Flo connection was restricted to Draco's signature. Wand drawn, Narcissa approached the entrance hall. Through the warped glass panels flanking the massive doors, she could make out 3 figures in dark robes. Not aurors, they traveled in pairs and wore distinctive uniforms. Ministry officials, perhaps, with another punitive assessment or property seizure. Who calls at Malfoy Manor? She demanded, activating the door's speaking charm. Friends of the old ways, Lady Malfoy, a male voice replied. We wish to discuss matters of mutual concern. Every instinct screamed danger. In the years since the war, friends of the old ways had come to mean those who still clung to pure-blood supremacy, who whispered that the Dark Lord had the right ideas, merely the wrong methods. I receive no visitors without prior arrangement, she replied coolly. Send an owl with your business, and perhaps I'll consider it. Our business is urgent, the voice insisted. It concerns your husband's early release. We have information you'll find valuable. Lucius, free. After serving only 3 years of his 10-year sentence. Impossible. And yet. I repeat, send an owl, she said, turning away. She'd taken only 3 steps when the ancient wood of the door splintered inward with a thunderous crash. The wards screamed in protest, magical backlash searing through her veins as the manor's defenses shattered. 3 masked figures strode in, wands raised. Not Death Eater masks, those would draw immediate aura attention, but simple black cloths tied across the lower half of their faces. Lady Malfoy, the tallest one said, voice smooth with mock deference. You should have invited us in. Now we've damaged your lovely home. Narcissa raised her wand. Expulso. The blasting curse caught the nearest intruder in the chest, hurling him backward through the shattered doorway. The other 2 split apart, firing hexes that she barely deflected with a hasty shield charm. The rumors of your skill were not exaggerated, the tall one commented, circling slowly. Bellatrix's sister indeed. You know nothing of me or my sister, Narcissa spat. State your business or leave. The second intruder laughed. Our business? You purebloods had your chance. You could have delivered Potter to the Dark Lord and ended it all. Instead, you chose the wrong side at the crucial moment. Crucio, the tall one shouted suddenly. Narcissa twisted away, the curse grazing her shoulder with white-hot pain. She stumbled against an antique table, sending a vase crashing to the marble floor. The Malfoys betrayed the cause, the man continued. And now you live in comfort while better servants rot in Azkaban. Comfort. Narcissa gave a brittle laugh, using the moment to subtly shift her position. Look around you. Does this look like comfort? Better than our friends deserve. Avada, Confringo. Narcissa's curse hit the massive chandelier above them. Crystal and metal rained down, forcing her attackers to dive for cover. She seized the moment, sprinting for the concealed passage behind the grand staircase. A cutting hex caught her across the back. She staggered but kept moving, slipping into the narrow corridor and sealing it behind her. Blood soaked her robes as she navigated the passage by wandlight, emerging in the east wing near her private chambers. "Think, Narcissa," she whispered, pressing a hand to her bleeding back. The Manor's main flue was in the drawing room, too far, too exposed. The wards were compromised, so anti-apparition measures might be failing too, but attempting to apparate while injured could result in splinching. Footsteps and angry voices echoed through the halls as her attackers searched. They'd find her soon enough. The manor was large but not infinite, and they'd shown they could break through magical barriers. Her gaze fell on a small silver box on her dressing table. Inside lay an emergency port key, a sapphire pendant Draco had insisted she keep after the war. One touch would transport her to a safe location. Where exactly, he'd never specified, calling it plausible deniability. As the voices grew closer, Narcissa snatched up the pendant. Clutching it tightly, she whispered, "Sanctuary," and felt the familiar hook behind her navel as the port key activated. The world dissolved into a blur of color and sound. When it reformed, she found herself on a rain-slicked London street before a row of townhouses. Pain and blood loss made her vision swim, but she recognized the location instantly. Number 12, Grimald Place. The ancestral home of the Blacks. Of course Draco would send her here, a property with connections to her maiden family but no longer in black hands. A place under Fidelius' charm where those hunting her couldn't follow. A place now owned by Harry Potter. Narcissa swayed on her feet, one hand pressed to her bleeding back, the other still clutching the port key. Pride warred with survival instinct as she stared at the door that had materialized between numbers 11 and 13. To seek help from Potter of all people, the boy who'd caused Lucius's downfall, who'd been central to the Dark Lord's defeat, who represented everything the Malfoys had opposed. The boy whose life she had saved. The boy who had spoken at both her and Draco's trials, securing their freedom when others would have seen them imprisoned. Her vision darkened at the edges. No choice, then. She stumbled up the steps and raised a trembling hand to knock. Harry Potter's day had started badly and steadily gotten worse. First, the hot water had failed in his shower, again, despite the small fortune he'd spent on magical plumbing repairs. Then he discovered his last clean aura robes had somehow acquired a large purple stain that resisted all cleaning charms. He'd arrived late to a departmental meeting, earning a pointed look from head aura robards, and subsequently been assigned to review cold case files, the wizarding equivalent of being exiled to desk duty. Now, at 8:30 in the evening, he sat surrounded by dusty folders detailing unsolved magical thefts from the 1970s. His stomach growled. He'd worked through dinner, hoping to finish early enough to meet Ron and Hermione for a late drink at the Leaky Cauldron. A knock at the front door pulled him from a particularly tedious report about vanishing Ashwinders. Harry frowned. Few people could even see Grimald Place through the Fidelius charm, and those who could generally flood or apparat directly in. Wand ready, he approached the door cautiously. The war might be 3 years past, but aura training and hard experience had ingrained permanent vigilance. A tap of his wand activated a viewing charm on the door, revealing a woman's figure on his doorstep. "Bloody hell," he muttered, recognizing the distinctive platinum blonde hair and aristocratic features, albeit paler and more strained than he remembered. Narcissa Malfoy was the last person he'd expected to find at his door. He yanked it open. "Mrs. Malfoy? What are you?" His question died as she looked up at him with pain-glazed eyes. "Mr. Potter. I find myself in need of assistance." Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed forward. Harry caught her reflexively, feeling warm wetness seeping through his shirt where her back pressed against his arm. "Blood." "Shit," he hissed, half carrying, half dragging her inside and kicking the door shut behind them. Creature. The ancient house elf appeared with a crack, eyes widening at the sight of Narcissa. The mistress's sister's daughter. What has happened to the noble black lady? I don't know. She's hurt, her back's bleeding badly. I need Dittany and blood replenishing potion, quick. As Creature disappeared, Harry gently lowered Narcissa onto her side on the sitting room sofa. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy. With careful movements, he shifted the torn fabric of her robes to examine the wound. A deep cutting curse had sliced across her back from shoulder to hip. Who did this to you? He murmured, though she couldn't hear him. Creature reappeared with the requested potions and a stack of clean cloths. Mistress Narcissa is hurt badly, he observed, ears drooping. Creature remembers her as a young lady visiting this house, always kind to Creature, unlike Mistress Bellatrix. Help me clean the wound, Harry directed, dabbing Dittany along the cut. The bleeding slowed as the magical essence worked, but Narcissa remained unconscious. I need to get these wet robes off her and check for other injuries. Together, they managed to remove her outer robes and the blood-soaked dress beneath, leaving her in a silk slip. Harry averted his eyes as much as possible while checking for additional wounds, finding only minor cuts and bruises besides the major gash across her back. Creature will prepare the blue bedroom for Mistress Narcissa, the elf announced once they'd bandaged her wound and administered the blood-replenishing potion. It was always kept for black family visitors. Harry nodded absently, his mind racing. What had happened? Why had Narcissa Malfoy, of all people, appeared wounded on his doorstep? Was she being pursued? Were his wards in danger? Let me know when the room's ready, he told Creature. And strengthen all the house's protections. Something's not right. While the elf bustled away, Harry cast additional security charms on the doors and windows. Then he sent his stag Patronus to Ron and Hermione, cancelling their plans with a vague reference to an unexpected situation at home. A soft moan drew his attention back to Narcissa. Her eyelids fluttered open, confusion evident as she took in her surroundings. Mrs. Malfoy, Harry said quietly, moving into her field of vision. You're at Grimald Place. You've been injured, but you're safe now. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed immediately by wariness. Potter. That's me, he agreed with a faint smile. Want to tell me why you showed up bleeding on my doorstep? She tried to sit up and winced. Attacked, at the manor. Who attacked you? Harry asked, aura instincts kicking in. Death Eater sympathizers. The opposite. Her voice was stronger now, though still strained. They claimed I betrayed the cause when I lied to the Dark Lord about you. Harry's eyebrows shot up. Few people knew about that moment in the Forbidden Forest when Narcissa had falsely declared him dead, allowing him the opportunity to later confront Voldemort. They broke through the manor's wards, she continued. 3 of them, masked. They said the Malfoys deserved punishment for choosing the wrong side at the crucial moment. Did you recognize any of them? Voices, magical signatures, anything? Narcissa shook her head slightly. Nothing definitive. But they knew things, about my sister, about our family. They weren't random vigilantes. Harry frowned. This wasn't the first attack on former Death Eater families he'd heard about recently. Just last month, the Greengrass estate had been burned to the ground, though the family had escaped unharmed. Before that, Theodore Knott's father had been found dead in suspicious circumstances shortly after his release from Azkaban. How did you get here? He asked. Emergency port key. From Draco. She closed her eyes briefly. I didn't know it would bring me here, specifically. I apologize for the intrusion. Harry ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Don't apologize. I'm glad you had somewhere to go. He paused. Though I have to ask, why did Draco give you a port key to my house? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I suspect precisely for this scenario. My son has developed a rather pragmatic outlook since the war. He knew that despite our history, you were unlikely to turn away someone in need. Particularly someone who once helped you. Before Harry could respond, Creature reappeared. The blue bedroom is prepared for Mistress Narcissa, with fresh linens and healing charms on the pillows. Thank you, Creature, Harry said. Mrs. Malfoy, you should rest. We can discuss what to do next in the morning. I don't wish to impose. You're not imposing, he interrupted firmly. You're injured, and whoever attacked you might still be looking for you. Grimald Place is under Fidelia's charm, you'll be safe here tonight. Something in her expression suggested she wanted to argue, but pain and exhaustion won out. Very well. For tonight. Harry helped her to the bedroom, trying to provide support without seeming too familiar. Narcissa Malfoy was still very much the aristocratic pure-blood lady, injured or not, and he sensed her discomfort at requiring assistance. Once she was settled, he hesitated at the door. I'll be down the hall if you need anything. There's a bell on the bedside table, it will summon Creature. Narcissa nodded, looking incongruously small against the pillows. Without her perfect posture and immaculate appearance, she seemed less formidable, more human. Thank you, Mr. Potter. Harry, he corrected automatically. Just Harry is fine. Harry, then. She said his name as if testing unfamiliar territory. Thank you for your assistance. He nodded awkwardly and closed the door. Back in his study, he stared at the abandoned case files with zero interest. The attack on Narcissa Malfoy connected to a disturbing pattern he'd been noticing in his aura work, a pattern his superiors seemed reluctant to investigate too deeply. Harry pulled out a fresh parchment and began making notes. Someone was targeting families connected to Voldemort, not current threats, but people who had already been judged by the Wisengamot and either served their sentences or been acquitted. Vigilante justice, or something more coordinated. The flue flared green, interrupting his thoughts. Hermione's face appeared in the flames. Harry? Is everything all right? Your message seemed odd. He glanced toward the staircase, then cast a quick muffliato before leaning closer to the fire. I've got Narcissa Malfoy unconscious in my guest bedroom. Hermione's eyes widened comically. You've got what? She showed up at my door an hour ago, bleeding from a cutting curse across her back. Said she was attacked at Malfoy Manor by people angry she helped me in the forest during the final battle. That's unexpected, Hermione managed. Is she going to be all right? I think so. Creature and I patched her up with Dibney. She lost some blood but the potion should help. He rubbed his temples. Hermione, this fits with those cases I was telling you about, the attacks on former Death Eater families. Her expression grew serious. The ones Robards keeps reassigning? Yeah. First Nott, then Greengrass, now Malfoy. Someone's targeting them systematically. But why? The war's been over for years. Harry shrugged. Some people think they got off too easily. There's been talk in the department, unofficial, but nasty, about how certain families avoided Azkaban on technicalities. Like Narcissa Malfoy's testimony being vital to your survival, Hermione observed. Have you reported this attack? Not yet. I wanted to let her rest first, get a proper statement. He hesitated. And honestly, I'm not sure who to trust with this information. Hermione's brow furrowed. That's concerning, Harry. If you can't trust your own department. I know. But something doesn't feel right. He sighed. Look, can you do some discreet research? See if there are other connections between these families besides the obvious Death Eater ties. Of course. I'll look into it first thing tomorrow. She paused. Do you need me to come over? Help with, the awkwardness of having your former enemy's mother in your guest room? Despite everything, Harry chuckled. I think I can manage. It's just for tonight. After Hermione's face disappeared from the fireplace, Harry sat back, suddenly aware of how exhausted he felt. He should sleep, but his mind kept churning. Why hadn't Narcissa gone to Draco for help? Why come to him, when there must be other pure-blood families who would shelter her? And what was he supposed to do with her tomorrow? Narcissa woke to unfamiliar surroundings and the distinct sensation of being watched. Her hand instinctively reached for her wand before memory returned, the attack, the portkey, Potter's house. Her wand was, where, exactly? Good morning, Mistress Narcissa. Creature has brought breakfast. The ancient house elf stood beside the bed, bearing a tray laden with tea, toast, and potions. Narcissa recognized him vaguely from childhood visits to her Aunt Walburga's home. Thank you, creature, she said, gingerly pushing herself upright. The slicing pain across her back had dulled to a persistent ache. What time is it? Nearly 9 o'clock, mistress. Master Harry left for the ministry at 7 but said he would return by midday to check on you. Creature set the tray across her lap. He has placed your wand on the dresser, and mistress's clothing has been cleaned and mended as best creature could manage. Narcissa glanced at the neatly folded stack of clothing, then back at the elf. That was thoughtful of him. Creature beamed. Master Harry is a good wizard, even if he is not a proper pureblood. He has improved greatly since creature first served him. The comment startled a small laugh from Narcissa. Has he indeed? And what improvements have you observed? The elf launched into a detailed assessment of Harry Potter's evolution from skinny, disrespectful boy to proper master of the noble house of Black, covering everything from his improved table manners to his more regular bathing habits. Narcissa found herself oddly entertained by the commentary, which provided a mundane, domestic view of the young man the wizarding world alternately worshipped and scrutinized. After breakfast and a careful washing at the bathroom sink, her back was still too tender for a proper bath. Narcissa dressed in her mended clothes. They were clearly expensive but showed signs of wear that would have been unthinkable in her previous life. When had she started making do with faded robes? She explored the bedroom, noting the black family crest carved into the headboard and the familiar constellation patterns in the ceiling mural. This had been the room her mother had always used when visiting Grimald Place, a detail Potter couldn't possibly know, yet somehow creature had placed her here. A wave of homesickness washed over her, not for Malfoy Manor with its tainted memories, but for the security of knowing exactly who she was and where she belonged. That certainty had evaporated the moment she'd lied to the Dark Lord about Potter's death. Restlessness drove her from the bedroom. The narrow hallway outside was dimly lit but notably cleaner than she remembered from childhood visits. No stuffed elf heads adorned the walls, though faded rectangles marked where they had once hung. She descended the creaking stairs slowly, one hand pressed to the small of her back. The house felt different, lighter somehow, despite the perpetual gloom of its architecture. Black family heirlooms still occupied corners and shelves, but mingled among them were incongruous items, a holyhead harpy's pennant, photographs of smiling redheads, muggle electrical devices whose purpose she couldn't begin to guess. In the sitting room, a large photograph above the mantel caught her eye. Potter stood between Granger and the youngest Weasley boy, all in formal robes at what appeared to be a ministry function. They were laughing, Potter's arms slung casually around Granger's shoulders while Weasley gestured animatedly about something out of frame. They looked so comfortable together. So certain of their place in each other's lives. Had she ever felt that kind of easy belonging? Even with Lucius, there had always been a certain performative quality to their relationship, two actors playing the roles of perfect pure-blood aristocrats. They clean up nice, don't they? Narcissa startled, turning to find Harry Potter leaning against the doorframe. He'd changed from aura robes into casual muggle jeans and a simple sweater that somehow made him look both younger and more approachable. I didn't hear you return, she said, embarrassed at being caught snooping. He shrugged. I came through the flu. How's your back feeling? Much improved, thank you. She gestured vaguely at the room. You've made interesting changes to the house. That's a diplomatic way of putting it, Potter said with a grin. Mrs. Black's portrait would have a conniption if she could see what I've done to the place. Though I did keep most of the family heirlooms, seemed wrong to just chuck them out. Narcissa tried to reconcile this relaxed young man with the tense, wary wizard who had faced the Dark Lord. Somewhere along the way, Harry Potter had grown comfortable in his own skin. I should contact Draco, she said abruptly. He'll be worried when he hears about the attack on the manor. Potter nodded. Already taken care of. I sent him an owl this morning, just said there was an incident and you were safe. Figured the details should come from you. Thank you. The words felt foreign on her tongue. How many times had she thanked this young man now? Hungry? Creatures made lunch. Without waiting for her response, Potter headed toward the kitchen. After a moment's hesitation, Narcissa followed. The kitchen was warmer and more welcoming than she remembered, though still recognizably a Black family space with its massive hearth and ancient wooden table. Creature had prepared a simple but elegant meal of soup and freshly baked bread. They ate in surprisingly companionable silence for several minutes before Potter set down his spoon. I need to ask you some questions about the attack. Officially, as an Auror. Narcissa nodded stiffly. Of course. I haven't filed a report yet, he continued, because something doesn't add up. There's been a pattern of attacks on families with Death Eater connections, but the department hasn't prioritized investigating them. Perhaps because no one particularly cares what happens to Death Eater families? Narcissa suggested dryly. Potter frowned. That's not how the law is supposed to work. Justice should be applied equally, regardless of which side someone was on in the war. How charmingly idealistic. Maybe, he conceded. But I became an Auror to uphold the law, not to selectively enforce it based on personal feelings. Narcissa studied him thoughtfully. You've changed, Mr. Potter. Harry, he corrected again. And yeah, I suppose I have. War does that. He refocused. Can you describe your attackers in detail? Anything distinctive about their speech, movements, magical style? She closed her eyes, mentally replaying the encounter. 3 men. Their faces were covered, but one was tall, over 6 feet, with unusually broad shoulders. His casting style was formal, almost textbook. The second was shorter, stockier, and moved like he'd had combat training, efficient movements, no wasted energy. The third, the one I blasted through the door, was younger judging by his voice. He called the tall one, sir, at one point. Potter looked impressed. You're observant. A necessary skill for survival in the circles I frequented, she replied. The tall one knew about my role in the forest, that I'd lied about your death. That information isn't widely known. No, it isn't, Potter agreed, frowning. I testified about it at your trial, but those records were sealed at your solicitor's request. Precisely. Which suggests either someone with ministry access or someone who was in the forest that day. She paused. They also said something odd, that I'd live in comfort while better servants rot in Azkaban. As if they personally knew Death Eaters who were imprisoned. Potter's frown deepened. Aurors or guards, perhaps. Some of them lost family in the war, harbor grudges. Is that why you haven't reported the attack? You suspect your own colleagues? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as signaling discomfort. I don't know what I suspect yet. But I'm not filing anything until I understand what's happening. Too many of these cases have been reassigned or mysteriously closed. Narcissa considered her options. She could insist on formal protection, demand an official investigation. But if Potter was right and there were elements within the ministry itself targeting families like hers. What do you suggest? She asked finally. Stay here for now, where it's safe. Let me do some quiet digging. He hesitated. I'd like to bring Hermione in on this. She has access to records I don't through her position in magical law. Narcissa stiffened. Miss Granger has little reason to help me, considering what happened to her in my home. Hermione believes in justice, even for people she doesn't like, Potter said simply. And she's brilliant at connecting dots no one else notices. Before she could respond, a tapping at the window announced an owl. Potter let it in, removed the attached letter, and frowned as he read its contents. It's from Robards, my boss, he explained. There's been another attack, this time on the Parkinson's country estate. No casualties, but significant property damage. The Parkinsons never even took the mark, Narcissa said. Pansy's father was a supporter financially, but he avoided direct involvement. Which makes this even stranger, Potter muttered. I need to go. Will you be all right here? The wards will keep you safe, and Creature can provide anything you need. Narcissa nodded slowly. I'll manage. But Mr. Potter, Harry, be careful. If ministry officials are involved. He gave her a crooked smile that unexpectedly reminded her of Sirius in his youth. Always am. Well, sometimes. Occasionally. After he left, Narcissa found herself at loose ends. She wandered through the house, noting changes and constants. The infamous tapestry of the Black family tree still hung in the drawing room, though someone had attempted to repair the blast marks where disowned members had been removed. Her own face stared back at her, connected by golden thread to Lucius and Draco. Her sister Andromeda's image had been crudely restored, along with her daughter Nymphadora and grandson Edward. Narcissa traced her fingers over Andromeda's face. She hadn't spoken to her sister since before Andromeda had eloped with the Muggle-born Ted Tonks. What would life have been like if she'd maintained that connection? If she'd had someone to turn to besides Lucius and his increasingly dangerous associates? A crack of apparition from the entryway startled her from these musings. Had Potter returned so quickly? Harry, she called, moving cautiously toward the sound. Afraid not, came a familiar drawling voice. Though I'm fascinated to hear you're on first-name terms with Potter now, Mother. Draco stood in the hallway, looking impeccable in business robes and radiating barely contained fury. His pale face was flushed with anger, his posture rigid. Draco, she breathed, relief warring with apprehension at his evident mood. How did you get in? Potter added me to the wards this morning when he contacted me, he replied tersely. Quite the little note that was. Your mother is safe at my house after an attack. No need to worry. As if that wouldn't send me into an absolute panic. I'm fine, she assured him, approaching to touch his arm. Just a minor injury, already healing. Minor? Draco's voice rose. I went to the manor before coming here. The front door is blasted to splinters, there's blood on the marble floor, and the entire east wing has been ransacked. Then I find you here, of all places, apparently chummy with Potter. He took me in when I had nowhere else to go, Narcissa said quietly. The portkey you gave me brought me to his doorstep. Draco's anger deflated slightly. I didn't think you'd actually need to use it. It was just a precaution. He paused. What happened? She led him to the sitting room and recounted the attack. By the time she finished, Draco's anger had transformed into cold calculation, an expression so reminiscent of Lucius that it momentarily took her breath away. This settles it, he said finally. You're coming with me to Geneva. Today. Draco, no arguments, Mother. The manor isn't safe. England isn't safe. I'm not leaving you here to be hunted by whoever these people are. Narcissa hesitated. The attack had shaken her more than she cared to admit. The prospect of starting over somewhere new, free from the weight of the Malfoy name and the manor's ghosts, held undeniable appeal. And yet. I need to understand what's happening first, she said slowly. If people are targeting families like ours systematically, running away won't solve the problem. They'll simply move on to other targets. Draco stared at her incredulously. Since when do you care what happens to other former Death Eater families? Self-preservation has always been the Malfoy way. Perhaps that's the problem, she replied softly. Perhaps always putting ourselves first is what led us here. You sound like a Gryffindor, Draco muttered, but there was less heat in his voice. What exactly do you propose? Helping Potter investigate? For now, yes. He believes there may be corruption within the ministry itself, people using their positions to carry out personal vendettas against those they feel escaped justice. Draco paced the length of the room. And you trust Potter with this? The same Potter who testified against Father? The same Potter who testified for both of us, Narcissa countered. Who spoke of my actions in the forest when few others would have believed it. Her son stopped pacing to study her face. What exactly happened between you and Potter in that forest? You've never told the full story. Narcissa looked away. That moment in the Forbidden Forest remained intensely private, the fear that had gripped her when the Dark Lord had ordered her to check whether Potter was alive, the desperate hope that had flickered to life when she'd felt his heart beating against her palm, the split-second decision to lie that had altered the course of the war. I made a choice, she said simply. To protect you, not him or his cause. But it seems our fates have been intertwined ever since. Draco opened his mouth to press further, but the flow activated before he could speak. Harry Potter stepped through, looking grim and dusty. He stopped short at the sight of Draco. Malfoy. Didn't expect to see you so soon. Evidently, Draco replied coldly. Your note was less than informative, Potter. Bit busy trying to investigate who's attacking your family to write a detailed letter, Potter shot back. His gaze shifted to Narcissa. The Parkinson situation is connected. Same MO, attackers in partial masks, specific knowledge of family activities during the war. Were they caught? She asked. Potter shook his head. Gone before Aurors arrived. But they left something behind this time. He pulled a small object from his pocket and placed it on the coffee table. It was a coin, similar to a galleon but with different markings. On one side was the symbol of the Deathly Hallows, a triangle containing a circle with a line through it. On the reverse, the words, "Justice Delayed," were inscribed around the edge. What is this? Draco demanded, leaning closer without touching it. Some kind of calling card, Potter replied. I've checked it for curses, it's clean. But I've never seen this symbol used this way before. Narcissa frowned. The Deathly Hallows? But that's associated with Grindelwald's movement, not the recent war. It's also associated with me, apparently, Potter said with a grimace. After the war, some people started using it as a symbol representing me because of, well, it's complicated. But there was a lot of rubbish in the Prophet about me mastering death. So these attackers see themselves as acting in your name? Draco asked skeptically. Or they want it to appear that way, Narcissa suggested. A convenient scapegoat if they're caught, claimed they were inspired by Potter's example. Potter ran a hand through his hair in that now familiar gesture. Either way, it's getting more dangerous. I think they're escalating. All the more reason for Mother to leave the country, Draco insisted. Come to Geneva where you'll be safe. Potter looked surprised. You're leaving? I haven't decided, Narcissa said quickly, inexplicably bothered by the flash of disappointment in Potter's expression. Not while this situation remains unresolved. It's not your responsibility to resolve it, Draco argued. Let Potter and his Aurors handle it, it's literally their job. A job they seem to be doing rather poorly, considering the pattern of attacks, Narcissa observed dryly. Potter didn't even look offended. She's not wrong, Malfoy. The unexpected agreement startled a laugh from Narcissa. Both men turned to her with identical expressions of surprise, which only made her laugh harder. The release of tension felt strangely freeing after days, no, years, of careful control. I'm sorry, she managed finally. It's just, the absurdity of this situation. The three of us, here, discussing cooperation. A reluctant smile tugged at Potter's lips. Life takes weird turns sometimes. Draco still looked unconvinced, but his posture had relaxed slightly. If, and I stress if, Mother stays, she can't remain at Malfoy Manor. It's too isolated, too obvious a target. She can stay here, Potter offered immediately. Grimald Place has some of the strongest wards in Britain, and only a handful of people can even see it exists. With you? Draco's eyebrows shot up. That's inappropriate, to say the least. Narcissa rolled her eyes. I'm 47 years old, Draco, not a schoolgirl concerned with proprieties. And it's hardly as if Mr. Potter and I will be unchaperoned with Creature constantly underfoot. It's just temporary, Potter added. Until we figure out who's behind the attacks. Draco looked between them with narrowed eyes, as if trying to solve a particularly complex arithmancy problem. Fine, he said finally. But I'm staying too, at least for a few days. I need to handle the Manor situation anyway, insurance claims, repair estimates. Potter nodded. I'll have Creature prepare another room. He hesitated. Actually, there's something else you should both see. He reached into his robes and withdrew a folded newspaper. Today's Prophet. It hasn't hit the stands yet, I got an advance copy from a contact. The headline blazed across the front page, Vigilante Justice. Former Death Eater families targeted in string of attacks. Below was a photograph of the damaged Parkinson estate, and smaller insets showing Knot, Greengrass, and, to Narcissa's shock, Malfoy Manor. How did they get that image? Draco demanded. The Manor attack just happened last night. Someone tipped them off, Potter said grimly. Which means either the attackers themselves are publicizing their activities, or someone in the Aura department is involved, Narcissa finished. Someone who knows about each attack almost immediately. Potter nodded. The article quotes an unnamed ministry source suggesting these attacks are the work of a grassroots movement calling themselves Hallows Justice. It also implies they're targeting families who escaped proper punishment after the war. They're trying to build public support, Narcissa realized. If people believe these attacks are righteous retribution rather than criminal assault, then no one will protest when the violence escalates, Potter confirmed. This isn't random vigilantism. It's organized, strategic, and someone wants the public on their side. The three of them stared at the newspaper in silence, the implications hanging heavy in the air. Whatever was happening, it had moved beyond simple revenge. Someone was orchestrating a campaign against former Death Eater families, and they had support within the ministry itself. Narcissa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty old house. She had survived one war only to find herself caught in what appeared to be the opening salvos of another, more insidious conflict. But this time, unexpectedly, she had Harry Potter on her side. The question was whether that would be enough to keep her, and others like her, safe. Hours later, Narcissa stood at the window of her borrowed bedroom, watching twilight descend over London. The day had been a whirlwind of activity following their discovery of the Prophet article. Potter had called Granger, who had arrived promptly with an armload of documents and an impressively neutral expression upon finding Narcissa and Draco in Harry's home. They'd spent the afternoon comparing notes. Granger had compiled a list of every attack or suspicious incident involving former Death Eater families in the past 6 months, a longer list than even Potter had realized. Patterns emerged. The attackers always had inside information about their targets, they never struck homes with active aura protection, and they seemed particularly focused on families who had avoided Azkaban through legal technicalities or testimony deals. They're targeting the Grey cases, Granger had explained. Not the obvious Death Eaters who got long sentences, but the supporters and sympathizers who walked free or received minimal punishment. The ones who inspire public resentment, Potter had added. People who don't believe justice was fully served. Now, as darkness fell, Narcissa contemplated her position. She was effectively in hiding in the home of Harry Potter, dependent on his protection and goodwill. Draco had reluctantly departed an hour ago to check on the manor and retrieve some of her belongings, still clearly unhappy about leaving her behind. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, turning from the window. Potter entered, carrying a tray with tea and sandwiches. "Thought you might be hungry. It's been a long day." "Thank you." She gestured to an armchair by the fireplace, taking the opposite seat as he set down the tray. "You've been very hospitable, considering our history." He shrugged, pouring tea for them both. "The war's been over for 3 years. Holding on to old grudges doesn't help anyone." A remarkably mature perspective for someone so young, she observed, accepting the cup he offered. Potter grinned. "Don't sound so surprised. I do occasionally have moments of wisdom." The easy banter between them felt strangely natural, considering they'd been on opposite sides of a war. Perhaps shared danger created unexpected bonds. "May I ask you something, Mr. Potter?" "Harry," he corrected automatically. "And sure." "Harry," she conceded. "Why did you become an Auror? After everything you experienced in the war, I'd have thought you'd had enough of fighting dark wizards." He considered the question, absently running a finger around the rim of his cup. "Partly because it's what everyone expected," he admitted. "The boy who lived, continuing to protect the wizarding world. But mostly because I thought I could make a difference, help rebuild the system to be fairer, more just." "And has it been fairer?" Potter, Harry, sighed. "Not as much as I'd hoped. There's still corruption, prejudice, people more interested in appearances than actual justice. But I have to believe change is possible, even if it's slow." "Even for people like me?" Narcissa asked softly. "Former Death Eater families?" His green eyes met hers directly. "Everyone deserves equal treatment under the law. That includes protection from those who take justice into their own hands." The conviction in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't merely professional duty, this was a deeply held belief. "You continue to surprise me, Harry Potter," she said quietly. He smiled slightly. "Good. I'd hate to be predictable." He hesitated, then added, "Can I ask you something now?" Narcissa nodded, curious. "That day in the forest, when you checked whether I was alive. You asked about Draco first, then lied to Voldemort. I've always wondered, would you have done the same if Draco hadn't been at Hogwarts? If your son wasn't in danger?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her motivations so directly. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Draco was everything to me, protecting him was my only priority. But..." She paused, searching for words. "By that point, I'd seen what victory for the Dark Lord truly meant. Not a restoration of pure-blood values, but madness and cruelty without end. Even if Draco had been safely away, I think I would have wanted the nightmare to end." Harry nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me. Why did you testify for me at my trial?" she asked suddenly. "You spoke of what happened in the forest, but you could have simply remained silent." "Because it was the truth," he said simply. "You saved my life, whatever your reasons. That deserved acknowledgement." They fell into companionable silence, sipping tea as the fire crackled. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows. Narcissa found herself unexpectedly comfortable in this strange circumstance, sharing quiet conversation with Harry Potter, of all people. "I should let you rest," Harry said eventually, rising. "Tomorrow I'm meeting with a contact who might have information about these Hallows Justice people. You'll be safe here, the wards won't allow anyone in without my direct permission." "Even your friends?" she asked, thinking of Ronald Weasley's likely reaction to finding her in Harry's home. "Especially my friends," he said with a wry smile. "Ron would have a conniption. I'll tell him when the time is right, but for now, the fewer people who know you're here, the better." After he left, Narcissa prepared for bed, moving carefully to avoid aggravating her healing wound. As she slipped beneath the covers, she found herself contemplating the strange turns her life had taken. 3 days ago, she'd been Lady Malfoy, alone in her crumbling manor, weighing Draco's offer of escape. Now she was effectively in hiding, working with Harry Potter to uncover a conspiracy against families like hers. And strangest of all, she felt more alive than she had in years. Sleep claimed her quickly, but her dreams were troubled, masked figures chasing her through the halls of Malfoy Manor, Lucius's voice calling her a traitor, Draco turning away in disgust. She woke with a start to find early morning sunlight filtering through the curtains and voices raised in argument downstairs. Quickly dressing, she made her way toward the sound, pausing on the stairs when she recognized Draco's voice. "Absolutely insane, Potter. You can't possibly trust him." "I don't trust him," came Harry's measured response. "But he has information we need, and he owes me a life debt. So does Wormtail, and look how that turned out for your parents." Narcissa winced at her son's tactless comment. Potter's reply was too quiet to hear, but when Draco spoke again, his tone had shifted from anger to grudging acquiescence. She descended the remaining stairs and entered the kitchen to find them glaring at each other across the table. Both looked up at her entrance. "Mother," Draco acknowledged stiffly. "I was just discussing Potter's questionable plan with him." "Good morning to you too, Draco," she said dryly, accepting a cup of tea from Creature. "What plan is this?" Harry ran a hand through his already messy hair. "I'm meeting with Gregory Goyle today. He's been working as an informant on underground pureblood extremist groups since his release from juvenile detention." "Goyle?" Narcissa raised an eyebrow. "Gregory Goyle barely managed to pass his OWLs. He's an informant now." "He's surprisingly effective," Harry said. "After his father received a life sentence and his mother committed suicide, he was left with nothing. The ministry offered him a deal, information in exchange for leniency. And now Potter thinks Goyle might know something about these Hallows Justice attacks," Draco added skeptically. "As if anyone would confide in him." "That's exactly why they do," Harry countered. "Everyone underestimates Goyle. They see the same slow-witted follower from school and assume he's harmless. But he listens, remembers, connects dots. While I'm fascinated by Mr. Goyle's unexpected talents," Narcissa interrupted, "I'm more concerned about what brought Draco back so early." She turned to her son. "What's happened?" Draco's expression tightened. "Someone broke into our Gringotts vault overnight. The goblins detected it this morning." "Broke into Gringotts?" Harry looked shocked. "That's supposed to be impossible without inside help." "Apparently not," Draco said grimly. "Nothing was taken, but they left another of those coins, same Hallows symbol, same, justice delayed, inscription." "A warning," Narcissa murmured. "They're showing they can reach us anywhere." "Not just a warning," Harry said slowly. "A message specifically for you, Mrs. Malfoy. They didn't take anything because they wanted you to know they could have. This is precisely why you should leave the country," Draco insisted, turning to his mother. "These people won't stop." Narcissa set down her cup with deliberate calm. "And go where, Draco? If they can breach Gringotts, they can certainly find me in Geneva. Running solves nothing. Staying could get you killed. So could fleeing, if we have no idea who's after us or how far their reach extends." She looked at Harry. "What time is your meeting with Mr. Goyle?" "Noon, at a Muggle pub in East London." He hesitated. "I'll need to go alone." "Goyle would bolt if he saw either of you." Narcissa nodded. "Understood. In the meantime, Draco and I will review the list of attacks Miss Granger compiled and see if we can identify additional patterns or potential targets." Her son looked mutinous but didn't argue further. After Harry left for the ministry, something about maintaining appearances by showing up at work before his lunch meeting, Draco paced the library while Narcissa examined Hermione's meticulous notes. "This is madness," Draco muttered. "Cooperating with Potter, hiding in my blood traitor relative's former home, waiting for some shadowy group to make their next move. What would you suggest instead?" Narcissa asked mildly, not looking up from her reading. Leave. Start over. Let the past bury itself. She glanced up then. Is that why you're so eager to go to Geneva? To bury the past. Draco stopped pacing. Isn't that what you want too? Freedom from the Malfoy name and all its baggage? Perhaps, she admitted. But there's a difference between moving forward and simply running away. She tapped the parchment before her. These attacks aren't random, Draco. They're methodical, escalating, and orchestrated by someone with significant resources and ministry access. All the more reason to get out of their reach. And what about the greengrasses? The Parkinsons? The Knots? Do we simply abandon them to their fate? Draco stared at her incredulously. Since when do you care about other families' welfare? You're starting to sound like Potter with his saving people complex. I'm starting to think his complex might have some merit, Narcissa said quietly. What has our Slytherin self-preservation gained us, in the end? A crumbling manor, a ruined reputation, a husband in prison, and perpetual isolation. Her son's expression softened slightly. I didn't realize you were so unhappy. Neither did I, until recently, she confessed. But this situation has forced me to examine what's truly important. And I've discovered I'm not ready to surrender without a fight. Draco studied her for a long moment. You've changed, Mother. Perhaps I'm simply becoming more myself, she replied. The self I might have been without the constraints of being Lucius Malfoy's wife. Whatever Draco might have said in response was interrupted by a silvery stag bounding through the wall, Potter's Patronus. Meeting moved up. Goyle spooked. Going now. Stay alert. The stag dissipated as quickly as it had appeared. Draco frowned. That's not good. If Goyle's spooked, someone may know Potter's investigating. Narcissa rose, suddenly restless. All the more reason to continue our work here. If Harry's cover is compromised, he'll need whatever information we can provide. They spent the next several hours poring over Hermione's data, cross-referencing attack dates with ministry activities and personnel movements. A pattern gradually emerged. Every attack had occurred on days when Head Auror Gawain Robards was officially out of the office on field inspections. It could be coincidence, Draco said dubiously. Or it could be exactly what we're looking for, Narcissa countered. Robards lost family in the First War, his brother and sister-in-law were killed by Death Eaters. Half the wizarding population lost someone, Draco pointed out. That's hardly conclusive. No, but it's suggestive when combined with his consistent absence during attacks and his position of authority over investigations. She jotted down additional notes. We should ask Harry to look into Robards' whereabouts during these incidents. The familiar use of Potter's given name earned her a sharp look from Draco, but he said nothing. They continued working until late afternoon, when hunger drove them to the kitchen in search of food. Master left instructions for dinner, Creature informed them, already busy at the stove. But he has not yet returned. Narcissa frowned. How long was his meeting supposed to last? Master did not say. Creature is making steak and kidney pie, Mistress Narcissa's childhood favorite. She blinked in surprise. How did you know that? The elf looked pleased with himself. Creature remembers young Miss Narcissa visiting with Mistress Druella. Miss always asked for second helpings of Creature's pie. The unexpected reminder of her childhood visits to this house, of a time before Dark Lords and Death Eaters, when she had simply been a young girl excited about her favorite dessert, touched something deep within Narcissa. She found herself smiling at the ancient elf. Thank you for remembering, Creature. By the time dinner was ready, however, Harry still hadn't returned. Narcissa found herself checking the clock with increasing frequency as they ate, worry gnawing at her despite her attempts to dismiss it as foolish. Potter can take care of himself, Draco said, noticing her distraction. He survived the Dark Lord, a meeting with Goyle hardly poses comparable danger. It's not Goyle I'm concerned about, she replied. If someone knew about their meeting, if it's a trap. The front door slammed open with such force that both Narcissa and Draco leapt to their feet, wands drawn. Heavy footsteps approached, and Harry appeared in the kitchen doorway, his clothes torn and dirty, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. "Sorry I'm late," he said grimly. "Ran into some of our friends from Hallows Justice." Chapter 2, Thawing Grounds, Bloody Hell, Potter. Draco jumped to his feet, knocking his chair backward. "What happened to you?" Harry staggered to the kitchen table, dropping heavily into an empty chair. His glasses sat crooked on his face, one lens cracked. Blood had dried in a streak down his cheek, and his left arm hung awkwardly at his side. "Ambush," he said through gritted teeth. "Goyle was being followed. They jumped us the second we started talking." Narcissa moved instantly, summoning the first aid kit she'd spotted earlier in the bathroom. "How badly are you injured?" "Just cuts and bruises. Maybe a dislocated shoulder." Harry winced as she gently probed his arm. "Nothing life-threatening." "Unless you count stupidity as life-threatening," Draco muttered, though there was less bite in his tone than usual. "Who attacked you?" "3 wizards, masks covering the lower half of their faces, just like the ones who attacked your mother." Harry sucked in a sharp breath as Narcissa cast a diagnostic charm on his shoulder. "Same group, definitely." "Dislocated," she confirmed. "I can reset it, but it will hurt." Harry nodded grimly. "Wouldn't be the first time." "Go ahead." Narcissa positioned herself behind his chair, placing one hand on his good shoulder for leverage and gripping his injured arm with the other. "On 3. 1, she yanked suddenly, twisting and pushing the joint back into place with practiced efficiency. "Bloody hell!" Harry shouted, half rising before collapsing back into the chair, panting. "What happened to 2 and 3? "Anticipation only makes it worse," she replied calmly, already reaching for a pain potion from the kit. "Drink this, then tell us exactly what happened with Mr. Goyle." Harry downed the potion in one gulp, grimacing at the taste. "Goyle contacted me this morning, said he had urgent information about the attacks. We arranged to meet at a Muggle pub in Hackney, neutral territory. He was already there when I arrived, looking nervous." "Gregory nervous?" "What a shocking development," Draco drawled, though he'd moved to fetch a clean washcloth and was now dampening it at the sink. "He said he'd overheard talk about Hallows Justice at a gambling den in Nocturne Alley," Harry continued, accepting the cloth from Draco with a nod of thanks. "Former ministry workers, bitter about how the war ended, planning to finish what the ministry started." His exact words. "Former ministry workers?" Narcissa asked sharply. "Not current." "That's what I asked too," but before Goyle could answer, spellfire hit the window beside us. 3 wizards operate directly into the pub, shouldn't have been possible with the anti-apparition wards I'd set up. "Which means they knew about the meeting in advance and had time to dismantle your wards," Draco observed. Harry nodded, wincing as he dabbed at the cut above his eye. "Exactly. They attacked immediately, no speeches, no gloating, just lethal intent. Professional. I managed to shield Goyle and myself, but they separated us in the chaos. Lost track of him when I had to evacuate the Muggles." "Always the hero," Draco muttered. "The pub was full of innocent people," Harry snapped. "What was I supposed to do, let them die as collateral damage?" Before Draco could retort, Narcissa cut in. "What happened to Goyle?" Harry's expression darkened. "Don't know. He disappeared in the chaos. Could have fled, could have been captured. I had my hands full getting the Muggles out before the place exploded." "Exploded?" Draco and Narcissa asked simultaneously. "Yeah. After I got the last civilians clear, one of them cast fiendfire. Destroyed the entire building. I barely got out." Harry's voice was matter-of-fact, but Narcissa didn't miss the slight tremor in his hand as he set down the washcloth. "They're escalating," willing to risk Muggle casualties, using unforgivables in public. Narcissa exchanged a look with Draco. Fiend fire was extremely difficult to control, using it in a public space indicated either exceptional magical skill or reckless disregard for collateral damage. Neither option was reassuring. "What of the Muggles who witnessed this?" she asked. "Ministry Obliviators were already arriving as I left," Harry replied. "Standard gas explosion cover story, I expect. I should have stayed to give a statement, but..." He trailed off, avoiding their eyes. "But what?" Draco pressed. "But I heard them coordinating by name. One of them called another Williamson." Harry looked up, his expression grim. "John Williamson is an Auror. Has been for 15 years. He works directly under Robards." Silence fell as the implications sank in. An active Auror participating in vigilante attacks meant their suspicions about Ministry involvement were confirmed. "We found something while you were gone," Narcissa said, sliding over the parchment with their findings. "Every attack has occurred when head Auror Robards was officially out of office on field inspections." Harry scanned the document, his frown deepening. "This can't be coincidence. Especially not with Williamson involved. He's Robards' right hand. So the head Auror himself is behind these attacks," Draco concluded. "We need to take this to Minister Shacklebolt immediately." "With what proof?" Harry countered. "Circumstantial timing and my word against a highly respected Auror. Robards is a war hero, trusted implicitly by the Minister. We'd need ironclad evidence before making accusations." "What about Goyle's testimony?" Narcissa suggested. "If we can find him." Harry sighed, running a hand through his hair. "And even then, Goyle's word carries little weight, ex-Death Eater's son with a juvenile record, working as an informant to stay out of Azkaban." Draco began pacing again, a habit Narcissa recognized from his father. "So we're trapped. Can't go to the Ministry because the Ministry itself may be compromised, can't gather evidence without exposing ourselves to attack. We need to move," Harry said suddenly, pushing himself to his feet. "Grimald Place isn't safe anymore. If Williamson is involved, he knows I live here. He's been here for order meetings during the war." Narcissa felt a chill. "You think they'll attack here?" "I think we can't risk staying to find out." Harry moved with renewed purpose, his injuries seemingly forgotten. "Creature." The elf appeared instantly. "Master called. We need to evacuate. Pack essentials for all three of us, clothing, toiletries, medical supplies. Food for at least a week. Meet us in the library in 15 minutes. Creature bowed. "Creature will prepare everything, Master Harry." Harry turned to Narcissa and Draco. "Gather anything important, but travel light. We need to be gone before they realize I've returned here." "Where are we going?" Draco demanded. "Somewhere even most of the Order doesn't know about," Harry replied. "A property that came into my possession after the war. It's under Fidelius with me as secret keeper." Narcissa nodded, already moving toward the stairs. 15 minutes. In her room, she quickly collected her few possessions, the clothing Draco had retrieved from the manor, her wand, a small silver hand mirror that had belonged to her mother. Everything else could be replaced if necessary. Her mind raced as she packed. The situation had escalated beyond anything she'd anticipated. Not random vigilantes but a coordinated operation led by the head Auror himself, a man with the resources of the entire magical law enforcement department at his disposal. When she returned to the library, Harry was pulling books from shelves and shrinking them into a moleskin pouch. Draco stood nearby, looking uncomfortable but determined, a small dragonhide case in his hands. "Are you both ready?" Harry asked, turning as she entered. Narcissa nodded. "What's the plan?" "We'll use the fleur to reach the leaky cauldron, then immediately apparate to a secondary location before heading to the final destination. Standard evasion tactics." You're assuming they haven't already traced the flu, Draco pointed out. They can trace it all they want, Harry replied with a grim smile. By the time they follow us through, we'll be long gone. Creature appeared with several shrunken trunks, which Harry added to his pouch. Creature, after we leave, go to Hogwarts and stay there until I summon you. Tell no one where we've gone. The elf looked distressed but nodded. Creature will protect Master's secrets. Harry handed each of them a pinch of flu powder. I'll go first, then Mrs. Malfoy, then Draco. Don't wait, follow immediately. Ready? Narcissa adjusted her grip on her small bag and nodded. Harry threw his powder into the fireplace, called the Leaky Cauldron, and vanished in green flames. She followed instantly, the familiar spinning sensation momentarily disorienting her before she stumbled out into the busy pub. Harry caught her arm, steadying her. This way, he murmured, already moving toward the door to Muggle London. Draco appeared behind them, face slightly green from the flu journey but recovering quickly. They slipped through the crowded bar, Harry keeping his head down to avoid recognition. Outside, the evening air was cool and damp, the street busy with Muggles hurrying home from work. Harry led them into a narrow alley beside the pub. Take my arms, he instructed. I'll side along both of you. Narcissa grasped his right arm while Draco reluctantly took his left. The discomfort of apparition squeezed her chest, and then they were standing in a deserted stretch of countryside, wind whipping their robes. Where are we? Draco asked, looking around at the empty moorland. Yorkshire, Harry replied shortly. Temporary stop. One more jump. Without further explanation, he apparat them again. This time, when the compression ended, they stood before a small stone cottage nestled against a hillside. Beyond it, Narcissa could see the glimmer of a lake catching the last rays of sunset. Potter Lodge, Harry said quietly. Built by my grandfather Fleamont as a hunting retreat. No one's used it in decades. The cottage looked modest from the outside, its stone walls weathered by time and elements. A small garden, long overgrown, surrounded the entrance. Yet despite its neglected appearance, it emanated a sense of sanctuary that Narcissa found immediately appealing, so different from the oppressive grandeur of Malfoy Manor. Harry approached the door, pressing his palm flat against the wood. I, Harry James Potter, claim this dwelling and welcome Narcissa Malfoy and Draco Malfoy as my guests. The door glowed briefly before swinging open. Blood wards? Narcissa asked, impressed despite herself. Among others, Harry confirmed. The Potters weren't as showy as some families, but they knew their protective magic. Inside, the cottage revealed itself to be larger than its exterior suggested, not through magical expansion, but clever design. A central living area with a massive stone fireplace opened to a modest kitchen. A staircase led to what Narcissa presumed were bedrooms above, while worn but quality furnishings filled the space. It's... Draco paused, clearly struggling to find a diplomatic description. Rustic? Harry suggested with a hint of amusement. Compared to Malfoy Manor, certainly. But it's secure and comfortable enough. He was right, Narcissa thought. The cottage held a lived-in warmth that her own ancestral home had always lacked. The furniture showed signs of use rather than preservation, the stone floors were softened by faded rugs, and family photographs lined the mantelpiece. It's lovely, she said sincerely, earning a surprised look from both Harry and Draco. Harry recovered first. Right, well, there are 3 bedrooms upstairs. You can take your pick. The kitchen should have preserved food stocks, magical maintenance spells have kept everything in stasis. I'll check the perimeter wards. As he headed back outside, Draco turned to Narcissa with raised eyebrows. Lovely. This place makes the Weasley hovel look palatial. Don't be a snob, Draco, she chided gently. It has character, which is more than can be said for those sterile modern flats you've been favoring lately. Her son looked affronted. My Geneva property is architecturally significant. And utterly soulless, she countered, moving to examine the photographs on the mantelpiece. Most featured a couple she assumed were Harry's grandparents, along with a young man who could only be James Potter. In one, James stood with a pretty red-haired girl, Harry's mother, presumably, both in Hogwarts robes with head student badges. "This is strange," Draco muttered, coming to stand beside her. "Being in Potter's family home, looking at his family pictures. If Father could see us now." "Your father made his choices," Narcissa said quietly. "As did I. Now we're making different ones." She moved away to explore the kitchen, leaving Draco staring thoughtfully at the photographs. The pantry revealed an impressive array of preserved goods under stasis charms, while the cold box, linked to an underground spring, according to a note pinned to the door, contained fresh dairy and vegetables, perfectly preserved despite years of disuse. By the time Harry returned, Narcissa had started preparing a simple meal. He paused in the doorway, watching her work with an unreadable expression. "The wards are intact," he reported. "I've added some additional protections and expanded the Fidelius to include both of you as partial secret keepers. You can't reveal the location to others, but you can now come and go without me." "Generous of you," Draco commented from his position by the fire. "Aren't you concerned we might lead our masked friends here?" "If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't have brought you," Harry said simply. "Besides, anyone following you would hit the Fidelius charm and see nothing but empty moorland." The straightforward admission of trust silenced Draco momentarily. Narcissa found herself equally surprised, and oddly touched, by Harry's matter-of-fact acceptance of them as allies. "Dinner will be ready shortly," she said, breaking the awkward silence. "It's just soup and bread, I'm afraid." "You didn't need to cook," Harry said, looking uncomfortable. "I could have handled it." "Cooking helps me think," she replied. "And I prefer to be useful." They ate at the small kitchen table, conversation limited to practical matters, sleeping arrangements, communication protocols, plans for gathering information. Afterward, exhaustion from the day's events caught up with them, and they retreated to their respective rooms. Narcissa chose the smallest bedroom, a snug space with a single bed and a window overlooking the lake. The linen smelled of lavender preservation charms, and the mattress, while firm, was surprisingly comfortable. Still, sleep eluded her as she replayed the day's revelations. Gawain Robards, head Auror and war hero, orchestrating attacks on families like hers. Aurors themselves participating in vigilante justice. The thin veneer of post-war peace shattered by the reality that hatred and vengeance still simmered beneath the surface. And yet, in the midst of danger, she'd found an unexpected ally in Harry Potter, the last person she would ever have imagined coming to her aid. Life, it seemed, had an infinite capacity for irony. Dawn found Narcissa already awake and watching mist rise from the lake. She'd slept fitfully, dreams filled with masked figures and burning buildings. The cottage was silent as she made her way downstairs, hoping tea might clear the cobwebs from her mind. In the kitchen, she was surprised to find Harry already seated at the table, a steaming mug before him, staring into space with the thousand-yard gaze she recognized from Lucius after his first stint in Azkaban. "Good morning," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He blinked, focus returning to his eyes. "Morning. Tea's fresh if you want some." "Thank you." She prepared a cup and joined him at the table. "Trouble sleeping?" A humorless smile touched his lips. "Old habits. I got used to early mornings during the war, less chance of being ambushed at dawn." Narcissa nodded, understanding perfectly. Hypervigilance. Lucius was the same after the First War. Never quite trusted that it was truly over. And he was right, wasn't he? Harry observed. It never really ended, just went underground for a while. Perhaps that's true of all wars, she mused. The fighting stops, but the hatred and fear that fueled it remain, waiting for the next spark. They fell silent, both contemplating this depressing thought. Outside, birds began their morning chorus, the peaceful sound at odds with their somber mood. I need to contact Hermione, Harry said eventually. She can research Robards' background, see if there are connections we're missing. How? We can't risk using Owls or the Flo network. Patronus messaging. He smiled slightly at her surprised expression. The Order developed it during the First War. A Patronus can carry a message directly to a specific person, bypassing all magical barriers. It can't be intercepted or traced. Impressive, Narcissa acknowledged. Though it does require the ability to cast a Patronus, which limits its utility. You can't cast one? Harry asked, looking genuinely curious rather than judgmental. She shook her head. It wasn't a spell favored in my circles, for obvious reasons. Because of its association with fighting dark creatures. Because it requires focusing on a genuinely happy memory, she corrected. Something pure and uncomplicated. Such moments were rare in my experience. Harry's expression softened with what might have been understanding. I could teach you. It's dead useful, and not just for messages. The offer caught her off guard. You would teach me? After everything my family did to yours? You're not your family, Harry said simply. No more than I am my father or Sirius, much as some people would like to pretend otherwise. Before she could respond, footsteps on the stairs announced Draco's arrival. He entered the kitchen looking uncharacteristically rumpled, his usually perfect hair sticking up in a way that reminded Narcissa painfully of his childhood. Please tell me there's coffee, he muttered, dropping into a chair. Harry smirked. Tea only, I'm afraid. The Potters were traditionalists. Draco groaned dramatically but accepted the cup Narcissa passed him. After a fortifying sip, he asked, so what's the plan for today? Besides hiding in this rustic hovel while murderous Aurors hunt us down? I'm going to contact Hermione for research help, Harry replied, ignoring the jibe about his family home. And I need to check in with work, call in sick or something. Can't just disappear without explanation. Won't they trace the communication? Draco asked skeptically. Not if I'm careful, Harry assured him. I've got a few tricks from Auror training. Meanwhile, I thought you two could review what we know about Hallows, Justice, and identify potential allies, people who might help without betraying us to Robards. A regrettably short list, Narcissa observed. Most of our former associates would sell us out in a heartbeat if it improved their own standing. I wasn't thinking of Death Eater connections, Harry clarified. More like neutral families who stayed out of the war but have influence. The Greengrasses, maybe. Weren't you courting their younger daughter, Draco? Draco's cheeks flushed. Astoria and I have a business arrangement, nothing more. But you're right that they might help. They've always prioritized family safety over politics. Good. Any others? Narcissa considered. Andromeda, she said finally. My sister has connections to both sides of the war through her late husband and daughter. If anyone could move between worlds without suspicion, it would be her. Harry's eyebrows rose. You want to contact Andromeda? I thought you hadn't spoken in decades. We haven't, Narcissa admitted. But desperate times call for desperate measures. And... She hesitated, perhaps it's time to repair that particular bridge. Her son stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. You want to reconcile with Aunt Andromeda? The blood traitor who married a mudblood. Don't use that word, Harry and Narcissa said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. Narcissa recovered first. That kind of language is precisely why we find ourselves in this position, Draco. The war is over. Clinging to old prejudices serves no purpose except to perpetuate the cycle of hatred. Since when do you care about blood prejudice? Draco demanded. You're the one who taught me that pure bloods were superior. And I was wrong, Narcissa said quietly. A difficult admission, but necessary. The beliefs I was raised with, that I raised you with, led our family to the Dark Lord's side, and look where that has left us. your father in prison, our home attacked, our lives threatened by people who see us as unworthy of the mercy the ministry showed us." Silence followed her declaration. Draco looked stunned, while Harry was watching her with an expression that might have been respect. "So you're just abandoning everything you've believed your entire life?" Draco finally asked, his voice uncertain. "I'm recognizing that beliefs can change when presented with new evidence," she corrected gently. "The war proved that blood purity was merely a convenient banner for power-hungry men to rally behind. It had nothing to do with preserving magical heritage and everything to do with control." Harry cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I agree about contacting Andromeda. She's been raising Teddy, my godson, since Remus and Tonks died. We've gotten close. I think she'd help, especially if you're genuine about reconciliation." Narcissa felt a pang at the mention of her sister raising a child alone after losing her daughter and son-in-law in the war. Another consequence of the side her family had chosen. "I am genuine," she assured him. "Long overdue, perhaps, but sincere nonetheless." "Then it's settled," Harry said, standing. "I'll contact Hermione, then we'll figure out a safe way to reach Andromeda." After breakfast, Harry retreated outside to send his Patronus messages, while Narcissa and Draco compiled what they knew about Hallow's justice on a charmed parchment that would only reveal its contents to the three of them. The work was slow and sometimes contentious, with Draco still processing his mother's apparent ideological reversal. By mid-morning, Harry returned looking pleased. "Hermione's on it. She says she's been suspicious of Robards for months. Apparently he's been blocking her department's efforts to review old cases for sentencing disparities." "That fits our theory," Narcissa noted. "If he's targeting those he believes escaped justice, he'd resist any official reconsideration of sentences." "Exactly. She's going to pull his personnel records and trace his movements during the attack timelines." Harry paused. "She also suggested we look into any personal vendettas Robards might have. Deaths in his family during the wars, properties seized, that sort of thing." "Did she say anything about Goyle?" Draco asked, trying to sound casual and not quite succeeding. Harry's expression darkened. "No sign of him. She's checking St. Mungo's and morgue records discreetly." The possibility that Gregory Goyle, dense, loyal Gregory who had followed Draco since childhood, might be dead because of his connection to them hung heavily in the air. "As for Andromeda," Harry continued, changing the subject, "I've arranged for her to meet us here tomorrow. She's one of the few people who already knew about Potter Lodge. She helped me claim the property after the war." "Tomorrow?" Narcissa felt suddenly nervous. "So soon?" "Time isn't on our side," Harry reminded her. "And Andromeda is trustworthy. She won't betray us, even if she decides not to help." The remainder of the day passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Harry showed them escape routes from the cottage and established emergency protocols in case they were discovered. Draco sent carefully worded messages to his business partners, explaining his unexpected absence without revealing his location. Narcissa focused on practical matters, inventorying supplies, preparing meals, ensuring they had essentials for an indefinite stay. That evening, as Draco napped upstairs, she found Harry sitting on the cottage's small porch, watching the sunset over the lake. He looked younger in the golden light, the weight of his responsibilities momentarily lifted from his shoulders. "May I join you?" she asked, pausing in the doorway. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "It's peaceful here," he said as she sat. "Sometimes I forget places like this exist, untouched by war, politics, all of it. It reminds me of my family's summer cottage in Cornwall," Narcissa admitted. "Before Hogwarts, before marriages were arranged, when life seemed simpler. My sisters and I would spend hours by the sea, collecting shells and pretending to be mermaids." Harry smiled at the image. Hard to imagine Bellatrix as a carefree child playing mermaids. "She wasn't always what she became," Narcissa said softly. "Bella was brilliant, protective, fierce in her loyalties. The darkness came later, gradually, until the sister I knew disappeared entirely. And Andromeda? What was she like? The peacemaker. The sensible one. When Bella and I quarreled, Andromeda found the compromise that satisfied us both. Narcissa gazed out at the darkening lake. She was the strongest of us, though I didn't recognize it then. It took tremendous courage to walk away from everything she'd been raised to believe. Like you're doing now? Harry suggested quietly. She glanced at him, surprised by his perception. Perhaps. Though in my case, it comes decades too late to prevent the damage done. It's never too late to change course, he said. At least, that's what Hermione always tells me when I'm being stubborn about something. Miss Granger seems very wise for her age. She is. Harry's affection for his friend was evident in his voice. Smartest person I know, and the most compassionate. She's the one who convinced me to testify at your trial, you know. This was news to Narcissa. I'd assumed that was your own decision. It was, ultimately. But I was angry after the war, at everyone associated with Voldemort. Hermione reminded me that justice isn't the same as vengeance, and that your actions in the forest, whatever your motivations, saved my life and helped end the war. I should thank her, then, Narcissa murmured. Her influence may have saved me from Azkaban. They fell silent, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The air grew cool, but Narcissa found herself reluctant to move, oddly comfortable in this shared moment of peace. Did you love him? Harry asked suddenly. Lucius, I mean. The personal question startled her, but something about the twilight intimacy of the moment made her answer honestly. Yes, once. He was charming, brilliant, ambitious, everything a young pure-blood woman was taught to value. And he loved me too, I believe, in his way. What changed? Power corrupts, she said simply. The more influence Lucius gained, the more he craved. The Dark Lord offered the ultimate opportunity, a chance to reshape the wizarding world with purebloods like us at the top. By the time Lucius realized the price was too high, we were in too deep to escape. But you did escape, in the end, Harry pointed out. You lied to Voldemort's face to find Draco. A mother's love trumped a wife's loyalty, Narcissa acknowledged. And perhaps that's when I truly began to see clearly, when I realized I would sacrifice anything, including the cause I'd supported for decades, to save my son. Harry nodded slowly. I understand that. My mother died to save me. The greatest sacrifice, Narcissa said softly. One I hope I would have had the courage to make, had it been required. The confession hung between them, intimate and raw. Narcissa felt oddly vulnerable, having shared more with Harry Potter in this quiet moment than she had with anyone in years. It's getting cold, Harry said eventually, rising. We should go in. Narcissa nodded, accepting his offered hand as she stood. His fingers were warm around hers, calloused from years of Quidditch and combat. For a brief moment, neither moved to let go, connected by this simple human contact. Then the door opened behind them, and Draco's voice broke the spell. There you are. I've been thinking about tomorrow's meeting with Andromeda, and I have concerns. Narcissa withdrew her hand from Harry's, turning to face her son with practiced composure. But as they went inside, she couldn't help glancing back at Harry, finding his eyes already on her with an expression that mirrored her own confusion about whatever had just passed between them. Morning arrived with a fine drizzle that shrouded the lake in mist. Narcissa woke early again but remained in her room, mentally preparing for the reunion with her estranged sister. How would Andromeda react? With anger? Indifference? The uncertainty left her uncharacteristically anxious. When she finally descended to the kitchen, both Harry and Draco were already there, an awkward silence hanging between them. Harry nodded a greeting, sliding a cup of tea toward her. Andromeda will be here at 11, he said. She's bringing Teddy. Her grandson? Narcissa asked, surprised. Is that wise, considering the circumstances? She doesn't trust anyone else to watch him, Harry explained. And she thought you might want to meet him. He's your grandnephew, after all. The thought of meeting her sister's grandson, the child of Nymphadora and the werewolf Remus Lupin, was another complication Narcissa hadn't anticipated. Yet she found herself curious about this young relative, the last connection to both the Black and Tonks bloodlines. That was thoughtful of her, she said finally. Draco, you'll finally meet your cousin. Her son looked uncomfortable. Second cousin, technically. And I'm not sure this family reunion is a priority given our current situation. On the contrary, Harry interjected. Building alliances is exactly what we need right now. Andromeda has connections throughout the wizarding world, people who would never speak to a Malfoy might listen to a Tonks. Draco looked ready to argue, but a sudden chime interrupted him. Harry straightened, drawing his wand. That's the outer ward alarm. Someone's approaching. Narcissa tensed, but Harry looked unconcerned. It's fine, the signature matches what I keyed in for Andromeda. She's early, that's all. He headed for the door, Narcissa following with Draco reluctantly bringing up the rear. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, though the sky remained overcast. A lone figure was walking up the path from the apparition point, carrying what appeared to be a small child. Narcissa's breath caught in her throat. Even at a distance, Andromeda's resemblance to Bellatrix was startling, the same dark curls, the same proud posture. Yet as she drew closer, the differences became apparent, softer features, warmer eyes, a mouth more given to smiling than sneering. Harry moved forward to greet her, taking the blue-haired child from her arms with practiced ease. You're early. Teddy was up with the birds, Andromeda replied, her voice so achingly familiar that Narcissa felt her eyes burn with unexpected tears. He's been excited about seeing his godfather. Her gaze moved past Harry to where Narcissa stood, and for a moment, neither sister spoke. Decades of estrangement, of silence, of pain hung between them. Hello, Andromeda, Narcissa said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. Andromeda's expression revealed nothing. Narcissa. You look, well. As do you, she replied automatically, the social niceties a shield against the emotional complexity of the moment. Draco cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should continue this inside. Standing in the open seems unwise, given the circumstances. Always practical, Draco, Andromeda said, her tone impossible to read. Yes, let's go inside. In the cottage's living room, Harry busied himself settling Teddy with toys while the three adults arranged themselves with the careful distance of diplomatic negotiations. The child, Narcissa noted, kept changing his hair color, cycling through blue, green, and purple with childish delight. He's a metamorphmagus, Andromeda explained, following Narcissa's gaze. Like his mother. He has Nymphadora's gift, Narcissa acknowledged. That's remarkable. Dora, Andromeda corrected. She preferred Dora or Tonks. Never Nymphadora. The gentle rebuke stung more than it should have. I'm sorry. I didn't know. There's much you don't know about my family, Andromeda said, a hint of steel entering her voice. Just as there's much I don't know about yours. Harry says you need my help, but he was vague about the details. Harry, who had been giving them space, rejoined the conversation. I thought it best if Narcissa explained the situation herself. All eyes turned to Narcissa, who found herself oddly hesitant. How to summarize the complex sequence of events that had led them here? The attacks, the conspiracy, her own evolving perspective? We believe the head Auror is orchestrating vigilante attacks against former Death Eater families, she began directly. My home was targeted 3 days ago. Harry has sheltered me, us, while we gather evidence. Andromeda's eyebrows rose. Gawain Robards. That's a serious accusation. With substantial circumstantial evidence, Draco added. And at least one Auror has been identified participating in the attacks. I see. Andromeda turned to Harry. And you're involved because? Because it's wrong, Harry said simply. Whatever they did during the war, these families have faced justice through the legal system. Vigilante attacks undermine everything we fought for. Very noble, Andromeda murmured, though without sarcasm. She returned her attention to Narcissa. But why come to me? We've hardly spoken in 25 years. Narcissa met her sister's gaze directly. Because you have connections to both sides of the war. Because you understand both worlds in a way few others do. And because. She hesitated, then continued quietly, because I hoped this might be an opportunity to begin mending what was broken between us. Andromeda studied her for a long moment, her expression guarded. That's quite an epiphany after decades of silence. Nearly dying can clarify one's priorities, Narcissa replied with unexpected honesty. As can watching everything you believed in crumble around you. Something shifted in Andromeda's eyes, not quite softening, but a flicker of recognition. She'd experienced her own losses, her own disillusionments. What exactly do you need from me? She asked finally. Information, Harry answered. Contacts within the ministry who aren't loyal to Robards. Safe channels to communicate with potential allies. And possibly a secure place to move if this location is compromised. You're asking me to risk my safety and my grandson's, Andromeda observed. For a sister who disowned me and a nephew who's a stranger. I'm asking you to help prevent another cycle of violence in our world, Harry corrected gently. For Teddy's sake, if nothing else. He deserves to grow up in a society where justice means something. Andromeda glanced at her grandson, who had abandoned his toys to toddle over to Harry. The child's hair shifted to black as he raised his arms to be picked up, a perfect mimicry of his godfather's perpetually messy style. You fight dirty, Harry Potter, she said, but there was fondness in her tone. I fight to win, he replied, lifting Teddy onto his lap. Andromeda turned back to Narcissa, her expression serious. If I help you, I want something in return. Name it, Narcissa said without hesitation. The truth. All of it. About why you stayed silent when I was cast out. About your role in the wars. About what's changed to make you seek reconciliation now, beyond mere convenience. The demand was fair but daunting. Some truths Narcissa had never spoken aloud, even to herself. I accept your terms, she said quietly. Though it may take time to share everything. We have time now, Andromeda replied, settling back in her chair with the air of someone prepared for a long conversation. Harry, perhaps you could take Draco and Teddy for a walk while my sister and I talk. Harry looked to Narcissa, who nodded slightly. Come on, Malfoy, he said, standing with Teddy still in his arms. I'll show you the trail around the lake. I'm not a babysitter, Potter, Draco protested. Consider it diplomatic training, Andromeda suggested dryly. My grandson is an excellent negotiator. As if to prove her point, Teddy reached out toward Draco, his hair shifting to platinum blonde. The unexpected mimicry startled a laugh from Narcissa and a look of bewildered fascination from her son. Fine, Draco conceded. But if he turns my hair blue, I accept no responsibility for my reaction. After they left, silence descended between the sisters. Narcissa found herself studying Andromeda's face, noting the new lines around her eyes, the streak of silver in her dark hair, physical manifestations of the years and experiences that separated them. You wanted the truth, she began finally. The truth is I was a coward. When you left, when our parents burned your name from the tapestry, I said nothing because I was afraid the same would happen to me. You were 16, Andromeda said unexpectedly. Still a child, really. Old enough to know better, Narcissa countered. Old enough to write to my sister, at least. But I didn't. I married Lucius, embraced the pure-blood ideology, raised Draco to believe the same nonsense that tore our family apart. And now? Now I see it for what it was, a convenient justification for power and control. The Dark Lord never cared about blood purity except as a rallying cry for followers. It was all about his own immortality, his own dominance. Andromeda nodded slowly. It took you longer to realize than some, but you got there eventually. The question is what you intend to do with that realization. I don't know, Narcissa admitted. For so long, my only purpose was protecting Draco. Now that he's grown, building his own life, I find myself at loose ends. Reinvention is painful, Andromeda said, a hint of sympathy entering her voice for the first time. When I left the family, I had to discover who Andromeda was without the black attached. Then again when Ted died, I had to find who I was without Tonks to define me. Now I'm a grandmother raising my grandson alone, reinventing myself once more. How do you do it? Narcissa asked, genuinely curious. Start over, I mean. One day at a time. You find what matters to you, what you believe in now, and you build from there. Andromeda studied her sister thoughtfully. I suspect you've already begun, whether you realize it or not. What makes you say that? You're here, aren't you? Staying with Harry Potter, of all people. Working to expose corruption rather than simply fleeing to safety. A ghost of a smile touched Andromeda's lips. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you've developed a certain appreciation for our sister's cousin's godson. Narcissa felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. I saw how you looked at him on the porch. I remember that expression, it's the same one you wore around Lucius before your marriage, when you thought no one was watching. That's absurd, Narcissa protested. He's half my age. 24 years your junior, Andromeda corrected. Significant, but hardly unprecedented. And he's an old 23, has been since he was 11, really. We're allies of convenience, nothing more, Narcissa insisted, uncomfortable with her sister's perceptiveness. Andromeda lifted an eyebrow in a gesture so reminiscent of their shared childhood that Narcissa felt a pang of nostalgia. If you say so. But I know you, sissy. You've always been drawn to power and competence, and Harry has both in abundance. The use of her childhood nickname cracked something in Narcissa's composure. I've missed you, she whispered, the words escaping before she could reconsider. Andromeda's expression softened. I've missed you too. Even when I was angriest, I missed my little sister. Can we start again? Narcissa asked, vulnerability bleeding into her voice. Not as if the past never happened, but, moving forward from here. I think we already have, Andromeda replied. After a moment's hesitation, she reached across the space between them and took Narcissa's hand. It won't be easy. There's too much history, too much pain on both sides. But I'm willing to try if you are. Narcissa squeezed her sister's hand, feeling as though a weight she'd carried for decades had begun to lift. I am. Very much so. When the men returned with Teddy an hour later, they found the sisters poring over a list of names, potential allies within the ministry who might help expose Robards without tipping him off. Progress, I see, Harry observed, looking pleased as he set a muddy, tired Teddy down. Of a sort, Andromeda agreed. We've identified several department heads who have no love for Robards and would be receptive to evidence of his misdeeds. The challenge will be approaching them securely. I have an idea about that, Harry said, running a hand through his windblown hair. But it's risky. Your ideas usually are, Draco muttered, though with less hostility than before. The walk appeared to have established, if not friendship, at least a functional truce between the former rivals. Harry outlined his plan. Andromeda would invite select officials to her home under the pretext of a memorial gathering for Tonks and Remus. Once there, Harry would reveal himself and present their evidence. With multiple witnesses present, Robards would find it difficult to silence or discredit them. It could work, Andromeda acknowledged. Many of these people knew Dora and Remus. They wouldn't question such an invitation. But we need more concrete evidence, Narcissa pointed out. Circumstantial timing and one Auror's presence aren't enough to convince skeptics. That's where this comes in, Harry said, pulling a small glass vial from his pocket. Inside swirled silvery, cloud-like material that Narcissa recognized as a memory. What is that? Draco asked. Goyle's memory of the conversation he overheard in Nocturne Alley, Harry explained. He sent it to me this morning via Hermione. Apparently he made it to her office after fleeing the pub. He's in a safe house now. Thank Merlin, Draco murmured, looking genuinely relieved. But how useful is it? Goyle's not exactly known for his observational skills. See for yourself, Harry offered, producing a portable pensieve, a rare and valuable magical object that Narcissa was surprised to see in his possession. I've already viewed it. It's illuminating. One by one, they entered the memory. Narcissa found herself in a dingy back room of what appeared to be an illegal gambling establishment. Goyle sat in a shadowed corner, apparently forgotten by the three wizards conversing nearby. She recognized Williamson immediately. The Auror had interviewed her after Lucius's arrest. The other two were unfamiliar, but their conversation was unmistakably about Hallow's justice. Robards wants the Parkinson place hit next, Williamson was saying. Minimal damage, just enough to scare them. Then we move on to the bigger targets. Greengrass has already packed up his family and fled to their villa in France, one man replied. Word spreading. Good. Fear works in our favor. The more of them that flee, the more guilty they appear. Williamson took a drink from a grimy glass. The public's on our side now, thanks to the Prophet coverage. Every article increases support for what we're doing. And Potter, the third man asked. Robard says he's getting suspicious, asking questions about the investigation reassignments. Potter's predictable, Williamson scoffed. Appeal to his sense of justice, his belief in the system, and he'll keep playing by the rules while we change the game around him. If he becomes a problem, well, accidents happen, even to the chosen one. The memory shifted as Goyle, clearly alarmed, moved to leave. But as he stood, he knocked over a bottle, drawing the attention of the three conspirators. Williamson's eyes narrowed in recognition. Goyle, he spat. Death Eater spawn. How convenient. The memory ended abruptly as Goyle fled, spells blasting past him. Back in the cottage, Narcissa processed what she'd witnessed. They directly mentioned Robards as directing the attacks. And threatened Harry, Andromeda added grimly. This is more serious than I thought. It's enough to warrant an investigation, Harry agreed. But we need to present it carefully, to people who can act without alerting Robards. What about Minister Shacklebolt? Draco suggested. He worked with the Order during the war, didn't he? Surely he'd listen. Kingsley's out of the country for the International Confederation Summit, Harry explained. Won't be back for a week. We can't wait that long. Agreed, Narcissa said. Especially now that they've identified Goyle as a witness. They'll accelerate their plans before he can expose them. Which means Draco could be in danger, Andromeda realized. If they're targeting families systematically, and they've already attacked Malfoy Manor. Narcissa felt a chill. She's right. You're the heir to the Malfoy name, the future of the bloodline. From their perspective, eliminating you would be a more permanent solution than frightening us into fleeing. Harry's expression hardened. Then we move now. Andromeda, can you arrange that gathering for tomorrow evening? She nodded. I'll send owls immediately. Who should be included besides those we've already discussed? Percy Weasley, Harry suggested. He's Undersecretary to the Minister now, with authority to act in Kingsley's absence. And Hermione, of course. We need her research on Robards. Plans were made quickly after that. Andromeda would return home to prepare for the gathering and send invitations. Harry would meet with Hermione to collect her findings and retrieve Goyle's physical testimony. Narcissa and Draco would remain at the cottage, compiling all evidence into a coherent presentation. As Andromeda prepared to leave with Teddy, she paused before Narcissa. "Be careful," she said quietly. "And remember what we discussed about new beginnings." Narcissa nodded, understanding her sister's veiled reference to their earlier conversation about Harry. "I will. Thank you for coming, for listening." "Family is family," Andromeda replied simply. "Even when it's complicated." She hesitated, then leaned forward to embrace Narcissa briefly. "Until tomorrow." After they departed, Harry prepared to leave as well. "I won't be gone long," he assured them. "The cottage's defenses are at full strength, but stay alert anyway." "We're not helpless, Potter," Draco drawled. "Contrary to appearances, Mother and I are quite capable of defending ourselves." "I know that," Harry said seriously. "I've seen your mother in action, remember? And I haven't forgotten that disarming charm you nearly hit me with in 6th year, would have worked if Snape hadn't interfered." The acknowledgement of their magical competence seemed to surprise Draco into momentary silence. Narcissa filled the gap, stepping forward to straighten the collar of Harry's cloak in a gesture that felt oddly intimate. "Be careful," she echoed her sister's words. "Williamson specifically mentioned you as a potential target." Harry caught her hand as she withdrew it. "I will. Promise." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary before releasing her and turning to the door. After he left, Draco stared at Narcissa with raised eyebrows. "Well, that was interesting." "What was?" she asked, feigning ignorance as she began gathering parchment for their evidence compilation. "That little moment with Potter. The hand-holding, the longing gazes. Should I be concerned my mother is developing feelings for my school nemesis?" Narcissa refused to rise to the bait. "Don't be ridiculous, Draco. We're allies in a dangerous situation, nothing more." "If you say so," he replied, clearly unconvinced. "Though I must say, your taste has improved since father. At least Potter's not likely to pledge allegiance to a megalomaniacal dark wizard." "Draco," she scolded, though without real heat. "Your father made mistakes, as did I. But he loved you, in his way." "I know," her son admitted more soberly. I can't help wondering how different our lives might have been if he'd made different choices. If you both had." "We can't change the past," Narcissa said gently. "We can only move forward, trying to do better." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, organizing evidence and constructing arguments. Narcissa found her thoughts drifting repeatedly to Harry, his unexpected kindness, his principled stance, the way his hand had felt holding hers. Andromeda's observations had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Was she developing feelings for Harry Potter? The idea seemed absurd on its face. He was decades her junior, the former enemy of her family, as different from Lucius as day from night. And yet, she couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt in his presence, the way her pulse quickened when he looked at her with those intense green eyes. "Mother, you're staring at the same parchment you've been holding for 10 minutes, Draco observed dryly. "Either it contains the secrets of the universe, or you're wool-gathering." Narcissa shook herself. "Just thinking about tomorrow's gathering. There are many ways it could go wrong. Including the possibility that it's a trap," Draco pointed out. "We're putting a great deal of trust in people who, until very recently, considered us the enemy." "We have little choice at this point," she replied. "And I believe Harry's judgment about who to trust is sound." "Harry, is it?" Draco smirked. "Not, Mr. Potter anymore." Narcissa gave her son a stern look. "We are guests in his family home, working closely together on a matter of life and death. First names seem appropriate under the circumstances." "Of course," Draco agreed, too innocently. "Perfectly logical. Nothing to do with the way you blush when he enters a room." "I do not blush," Narcissa protested, feeling her cheeks warm traitorously. "And this conversation is becoming ridiculous." Draco raised his hands in surrender, though his smirk remained firmly in place. Whatever you say, Mother. I'm simply making observations. They returned to their work, but Narcissa found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. The cottage felt different with Harry absent, less secure, certainly, but also less alive, somehow. His energy and determination had become a constant she hadn't realized she'd come to rely on. Hours passed with no word. Outside, darkness fell, and rain began to patter against the windows once more. Narcissa prepared a simple dinner, but neither she nor Draco had much appetite. By 9 o'clock, concern had blossomed into genuine worry. He should have been back by now, she said, peering out at the rain-soaked landscape. Even allowing for delays with Hermione or difficulty accessing Goyle. Draco looked up from the book he'd been pretending to read. Potter can handle himself. He's probably just being cautious, taking a circuitous route back. Perhaps, she agreed, not entirely convinced. But what if Williamson intercepted him? What if they've realized we have Goyle's memory? Then we'd have heard something by now, Draco reasoned. An attack on the cottage, or at least activity at the ward boundaries. Robards wouldn't waste time if he knew our location. He was right, of course, but logic did little to ease Narcissa's growing anxiety. She was about to suggest sending a Patronus message, though to whom, she wasn't certain, when the ward alarm chimed. Both Malfoys drew their wands instantly, moving to defensive positions. Draco near the hallway, Narcissa by the front windows where she could observe the approach path. One figure, she reported, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. Moving quickly. It's Harry. Relief flooded her, only to be replaced by renewed concern as she noted his unsteady gait. She moved to the door, opening it as he staggered up the steps. Rain had soaked him to the skin, plastering his hair to his forehead and revealing a nasty bruise forming around his left eye. What happened? She demanded, helping him inside. Ambush, he gasped, leaning heavily against her. Outside Hermione's office. Williamson and 2 others. Got away, but they followed, had to take detours, make sure I lost them. Draco helped her guide Harry to a chair. Are you injured beyond the obvious? Bruised ribs, maybe a mild concussion. Nothing serious. Harry fumbled in his pocket, producing a shrunken folder. Got what we needed, though. Hermione's research, witness statements from 3 former Aurors who left the department because of Robards, and a sealed letter from Kingsley Shacklebolt himself. Narcissa stared at him. From the minister? How? Hermione had it, Harry explained, accepting the healing potion Draco had retrieved from their supplies. Kingsley left it with her before departing for the ICW summit. Apparently he's had concerns about Robards for months but lacked proof to act. The letter authorizes an independent investigation if credible evidence emerged in his absence. That's incredibly fortunate, Narcissa said slowly. Or incredibly suspicious, Draco countered. This all seems too convenient. The minister just happened to leave authorization for an investigation into the exact conspiracy we've uncovered. Harry shook his head, then winced at the movement. Kingsley didn't know the specifics. He'd noticed patterns, cases reassigned, investigations blocked, former Death Eater families reporting harassment that never resulted in arrests. He suspected something, just not what or who. Still, Draco persisted, we should consider the possibility of a trap. What if this gathering tomorrow is just a way to collect all of us in one place? Possible, Harry acknowledged. But unlikely. Andromeda's home has nearly as many protections as this cottage. And the people we've invited have all opposed Robards in some way over the past year, blocked promotions for his favorites, questioned his budget allocations, challenged his procedural changes. Narcissa moved to examine Harry's injuries more closely, gently tilting his face to better see the bruising. You need rest. Arguments about tomorrow can wait until morning. To her surprise, he didn't protest, instead leaning slightly into her touch. Probably right. It's been a long day. Can you make it upstairs? She asked. I'll help him, Draco offered unexpectedly. You finish securing the wards for the night. As they disappeared up the staircase, Harry leaning on Draco's shoulder, Narcissa found herself smiling faintly at this evidence of her son's evolving attitude. Perhaps there was hope for reconciliation beyond her sister after all. She completed the nightly ward checks, a ritual Harry had taught them that first day, then prepared a tray with pain potions, healing salve, and tea for Harry's bedside. When she reached his room, she found Draco just leaving. He's half asleep already, her son reported. Though he insisted on reviewing the memory one more time before I left. Stubborn git. Thank you for helping him, Narcissa said sincerely. Draco shrugged. Don't read too much into it. We need him functional for tomorrow. Of course, she agreed, hiding a smile at his attempt to maintain his aloof facade. Get some rest yourself. Tomorrow will be challenging. Inside Harry's room, she found him propped against the headboard, eyes closed but breathing indicating he wasn't yet asleep. He opened his eyes as she approached, offering a tired smile. Brought you more healing supplies, she explained, setting the tray beside his bed. The bruising looks painful. Had worse, he said dismissively, though he reached gratefully for the pain potion. Thank you, though. You should sleep, she advised, arranging the pillows more comfortably behind him. Your body needs rest to heal properly. He caught her wrist gently as she withdrew. Stay. Just for a bit. My head's still spinning with everything that happened today. Narcissa hesitated, acutely aware of the impropriety, and of Draco's earlier teasing about her feelings. But Harry's expression was open, vulnerable in a way she rarely saw, and she found herself unable to refuse. Just until you fall asleep, she agreed, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. I was worried they might have found you, Harry admitted quietly. When Williamson ambushed me, my first thought wasn't for my own safety but for yours, both of yours, he added hastily. That they might have tracked me somehow, found the cottage. We were concerned about you as well, Narcissa confessed. When you didn't return on schedule. Hermione says I have a saving people thing, Harry murmured, eyes drooping as the pain potion began to take effect. Never expected that to extend to the Malfoys. Life takes unexpected turns, Narcissa quoted his own words back to him. For all of us. His smile was soft, sleepy. I'm glad you're here, Narcissa. Safe. The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her. As am I, Harry. Now rest. She remained beside him until his breathing deepened into sleep, his features relaxed and suddenly young in repose. Gently, she removed his cracked glasses, setting them on the bedside table. An impulse she didn't examine too closely led her to brush a strand of hair from his forehead, fingers lightly tracing the famous scar that had shaped so much of his life, and, indirectly, hers. Good night, Harry, she whispered, before quietly leaving the room. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, eyes closed, trying to make sense of the emotions churning within her. Concern, certainly. Gratitude for his protection. But also something else, something that made her heart beat faster when he looked at her with those expressive green eyes, something that had made her linger beside his bed longer than necessary. Andromeda was right. Against all logic, against all propriety, she was developing feelings for Harry Potter. And she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Morning dawned clear and cool, the previous day's rain leaving the landscape washed clean. Narcissa woke from fitful dreams to find sunlight streaming through her window. She dressed quickly, anxious to check on Harry after his injuries. She needn't have worried. When she entered the kitchen, she found him already up, moving with only slight stiffness as he prepared breakfast. The bruising around his eye had faded significantly overnight, either from magical healing or his own naturally quick recovery. Good morning, he greeted her cheerfully. Sleep well? Well enough, she replied, studying him. You seem remarkably recovered. He touched his face self-consciously. Magical healing's improved a lot since the war. And I've always been a quick healer, had to be, growing up with the Dursleys. Something in his tone made Narcissa suspect there was more to that statement than simple observation, but before she could inquire further, Draco joined them, his hair uncharacteristically disheveled. "Tell me that's coffee I smell," he mumbled, dropping into a chair. Harry smirked. "Found some in the back of the pantry. Thought you might need it for today." "Considerate of you," Draco acknowledged, accepting a steaming mug. After a fortifying sip, he asked, "What's the plan for getting to Andromeda safely?" "We'll use a combination of apparition and Muggle transportation," Harry explained, serving eggs and toast. "Multiple jumps to shake any tracking, then a Muggle taxi for the final approach. The gathering is set for 6 o'clock, which gives us time to review all the evidence with Hermione before the others arrive." "And if something goes wrong?" Narcissa asked quietly. "If it is a trap." Harry met her eyes steadily. "Then we fight. But it won't come to that. I trust the people we've invited." "Your faith in others is admirable," she observed, if occasionally misplaced. "It's served me well so far," he countered with a small smile. "After all, I trusted you in the forest, didn't I?" The reminder silenced her objections. He had trusted her at a moment when he had every reason not to, and that trust had helped turn the tide of the war. They spent the morning reviewing their evidence and finalizing their presentation. By mid-afternoon, they were ready to depart. The cottage was secured, emergency plans established in case they needed to flee separately, their most crucial evidence duplicated and hidden in multiple locations. Harry led them through a series of apparition jumps, first to a remote hillside in Wales, then to an alley in Birmingham, followed by a small village in Surrey. Finally, they took a Muggle taxi from a train station to a location a half-mile from Andromeda's home, walking the remaining distance under disillusionment charms. Andromeda's house was a modest cottage on the outskirts of a wizarding village, its garden bursting with late summer blooms. As they approached, Narcissa felt a flutter of nerves, partly from the high-stakes nature of their plan, but also from the prospect of entering her sister's home for the first time. Hermione Granger met them at the door, her expression a careful neutral as she ushered them inside. "Everyone's in the sitting room," she reported quietly. Percy Weasley, Augusta Longbottom, Hestia Jones from Magical Law Enforcement, and Tiberius Ogden from the Wizengamot. "Impressive gathering," Harry commented. "Any issues?" "None so far." Andromeda invited them for a memorial planning committee meeting, and no one questioned it. Hermione glanced at Narcissa and Draco. "Though I should warn you, Mrs. Longbottom may be less than welcoming." "Understandable," Narcissa murmured, thinking of Augusta Longbottom's son and daughter-in-law, tortured to insanity by Bellatrix. Another family debt she could never truly repay. In the sitting room, conversation halted abruptly as they entered. Narcissa felt the weight of surprised and suspicious gazes, particularly from Augusta Longbottom, whose expression could have curdled milk. "What is the meaning of this?" the elderly witch demanded, rising from her seat with surprising vigor. "Andromeda, you invite me to help plan a memorial for your daughter and son-in-law, and then bring Death Eaters into your home?" "Former Death Eaters," Andromeda corrected calmly. "And my sister and nephew are here at my invitation, as is Harry. Please hear them out before making judgments." "I trust there is a compelling explanation," Tiberius Ogden said, his deep voice carrying authority from decades on the Wizengamot. "Mr. Potter, perhaps you would care to enlighten us?" Harry stepped forward, projecting the quiet confidence Narcissa had come to associate with him. "Thank you all for coming. I apologize for the deception, but secrecy was essential. We've uncovered evidence of a conspiracy within the Auror Department, a vigilante group calling themselves Hallows Justice, led by head Auror Robarts himself." Exclamations of disbelief and concern followed this announcement. Percy Weasley, looking official in ministry robes, raised a hand for silence. "These are serious accusations, Harry. What evidence do you have?" For the next hour, they presented their case, the pattern of attacks, the timing coinciding with Robards' absences, Goyle's memory, the testimonies Hermione had gathered from former Aurors. Throughout, Narcissa remained quiet, allowing Harry and Hermione to lead the presentation while she observed the reactions of their audience. Augusta Longbottom remained stone-faced but attentive. Hestia Jones grew increasingly troubled, occasionally nodding as connections became clear. Percy Weasley took copious notes, his expression moving from skeptical to grave as the evidence mounted. Tiberius Ogden asked pointed questions that revealed his legal mind working through the implications. When they finished, silence fell over the room. Finally, Ogden spoke. If, and I stress if, these allegations are proven, they represent a profound breach of trust and abuse of power. The Wisengamot would have no choice but to convene a special tribunal. The question is how to proceed without alerting Robards, Hestia added. If he realizes we're investigating, evidence could disappear, witnesses could be silenced. We have the minister's authorization, Percy said, examining the sealed letter Harry had provided. This appears genuine. In Kingsley's absence, it grants me temporary authority to assemble an investigative team independent of DMLE oversight. Then we move quickly, Harry urged. Robards is escalating. His next targets may not survive. Augusta Longbottom, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. Why are you involved in this, Mr. Potter? These people, she gestured toward Narcissa and Draco, and their kind would have seen you dead not 3 years ago. Why risk yourself to protect them now? All eyes turned to Harry, who didn't hesitate. Because justice doesn't pick sides, Mrs. Longbottom. Either we believe in a society governed by law, or we don't. If we allow vigilantes to target people who have already faced legal judgment, we're no better than the Death Eaters who tortured and killed based on their own twisted sense of righteousness. The old woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, sharply. Frank would have said the same. Very well. I will support this investigation. A collective breath seemed to release around the room. With Augusta Longbottom's moral authority behind them, the others fell quickly into planning mode, establishing secure communications, dividing responsibilities, setting timelines for action. Narcissa found herself standing slightly apart, watching Harry as he moved among these people who had once been enemies of her family, earning their trust, building consensus. She couldn't help but admire his skill, not just magical prowess, but this more subtle ability to lead without dominating, to persuade without coercion. He's quite remarkable, isn't he? Andromeda murmured, appearing beside her. Narcissa smiled faintly. He is. Though I'm sure he'd deny it. Vigorously, her sister agreed. Harry detests praise almost as much as he hates injustice. It's what makes him so effective, and so dangerous to people like Robards. Their conversation was interrupted by Percy Weasley approaching, his manner formal but not hostile. Mrs. Malfoy, I've been authorized to offer you and your son protective custody until this matter is resolved. A safe house has been prepared, with appropriate security measures. Narcissa glanced at Draco, who had been deep in conversation with Hermione, apparently debating some legal technicality. That's very considerate, Mr. Weasley. However, I believe we'll continue to assist with the investigation directly. Our personal experience with these attacks provides valuable context. Percy frowned. It could be dangerous. Robards may already suspect your involvement. All the more reason to see this through, she replied firmly. We caused harm during the war, Mr. Weasley. Allow us the opportunity to help correct an injustice now. Something like respect flickered in the young man's eyes. As you wish. But please exercise caution. The ministry has already failed your family once by not preventing these attacks. I would not wish to see that failure compound itself. As Percy moved away, Harry joined them, a concerned crease between his brows. Everything all right? Fine, Narcissa assured him. Mr. Weasley was offering protection, which I've politely declined. Harry looked like he wanted to argue but restrained himself. Your decision. But stay close during the next phase. We're moving to secure Goyle's formal testimony tomorrow, and Hermione thinks Robards will make his move soon, possibly against the Greengrasses, who've just returned from France. The Greengrasses? Draco's head snapped up from across the room. Astoria's family? Yes, Hermione confirmed. Our sources indicate they're back at their main estate, having received assurances of safety from the Ministry, assurances that came directly from Robards' office. It's a trap, Draco said immediately, face paling. He's luring them back to make an example of them. Exactly our assessment, Harry agreed. We're sending a warning, but communications may be monitored. Percy's assembling a protective detail, but they won't be in place until morning. Draco was already on his feet. That's not good enough. Astoria, the family, they need to be warned immediately, in person. Draco, Narcissa cautioned, alarmed by the reckless determination in her son's expression. Think carefully. If Robards is watching the Greengrass estate, I don't care, he interrupted. Astoria's been my friend since childhood. More than that, he stopped, seeming to catch himself. I won't leave her unprotected when I know she's in danger. Harry and Narcissa exchanged glances. We'll come with you, Harry decided. Safety in numbers, and my aura credentials might help if we're challenged. I'm coming as well, Hermione announced. You'll need someone with a direct line to Percy if things go wrong. Plans shifted rapidly after that. The meeting dispersed with assignments and timetables, Ogden and Augusta returning to their homes to avoid arousing suspicion while Percy and Hestia began the delicate process of identifying trustworthy Aurors for the coming confrontation. Andromeda would remain at her cottage with Teddy, serving as a communications hub through a network of charmed parchments Hermione had developed during the war. As they prepared to depart for the Greengrass estate, Andromeda pulled Narcissa aside for a private word. Be careful, she said, echoing their exchange from the previous day. And watch out for Draco. There's more between him and Astoria Greengrass than he's acknowledged. I suspected as much, Narcissa replied. His business arrangement excuse never rang true. Men can be remarkably obtuse about their own feelings, Andromeda observed with a pointed glance toward Harry, who was conferring with Hermione near the door. It sometimes runs in families. Narcissa chose to ignore the implication. We'll be careful. And, thank you, Andy. For everything. The childhood nickname brought a smile to her sister's face. We Blacks have to stick together, don't we? What's left of us, anyway? They embraced briefly, a gesture that felt more natural than Narcissa would have expected after decades of estrangement. Then, with final preparations complete, their small group departed for the Greengrass estate. The property was located in rural Kent, surrounded by extensive grounds that had once rivaled Malfoy manors in elegance, though on a smaller scale. As they approached under disillusionment charms, Narcissa noted the eerie quiet, no birds sang in the trees, no insects buzzed in the twilight air. Silencing charms, Harry murmured, confirming her suspicion. Recently cast. Someone's already here. How do we get in without triggering alarms? Hermione whispered. Draco stepped forward. I know a way. Family entrance in the East Garden, Astoria showed me once. It's keyed to accept friends of the family. Lead on, Harry directed, his wand already drawn. They followed Draco through the elaborate gardens, moving silently between topiary sculptures and ornamental fountains. The east entrance proved to be a modest door set into a ivy-covered wall, easily overlooked unless you knew to seek it. Draco pressed his palm to a carved rose at the center of the door. Draco Malfoy, friend of Astoria Greengrass, seeks entrance, he murmured. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the door shimmered slightly and swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. That was suspiciously easy, Hermione observed. The wards recognize me, Draco explained. But you're right to be cautious. Stay behind me. The passage led to a sunroom currently cast in shadow by the setting sun. Beyond, they could see lights in what appeared to be the main house. Draco moved forward confidently, leading them through connecting rooms toward the source of the illumination. As they neared what Narcissa guessed was the main drawing room, voices became audible, a man's deep tones, followed by a young woman's reply, tense but controlled. "Can't simply leave again," the female voice was saying. "The ministry assured us it was safe to return." "The ministry doesn't always have the best information, Miss Greengrass," came the reply, a voice Narcissa recognized with a chill. "Robards himself. Which is why I've come personally to escort your family to a secure location." Draco's pace quickened, forcing the others to hurry to keep up. He reached the drawing room entrance and stopped abruptly, taking in the scene before them, Astoria Greengrass standing proudly beside her seated parents, facing Gawain Robards and two other wizards in aura robes. "I don't think that will be necessary," Draco announced, dropping his disillusionment charm as he stepped into the room. All heads turned toward him. Astoria's eyes widened in shock, while Robard's expression shifted from surprise to calculating in an instant. "Mr. Malfoy," the head Auror said smoothly. "What an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware you were acquainted with the Greengrass family." "Old friends," Draco replied, matching Robard's false pleasantness. "When I heard they'd returned to England, I thought I'd pay my respects." Harry, Hermione, and Narcissa had remained disillusioned in the doorway, a tactical advantage Narcissa appreciated. Robards might suspect Draco wasn't alone, but he couldn't be certain. "How thoughtful," Robards said. "Though your timing is unfortunate. I was just explaining to the Greengrasses that we've received credible threats against their safety. I'm arranging protective custody." "How curious," Draco observed. "Since we have information suggesting the greatest threat to the Greengrass family might be from within the ministry itself." Robard's eyes hardened, though his smile remained fixed. "Bold accusations, Mr. Malfoy. Especially from someone with your family's history." "We know about Hallow's justice," Draco continued, ignoring the implied threat. "We know about Williamson, about the attacks, about your field inspection schedules coinciding perfectly with vigilante activities." For a fraction of a second, Robard's composure slipped, revealing a flash of anger before his mask of professional concern returned. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Malfoy. Perhaps we should discuss them at the ministry, where you can present whatever evidence you believe you have." "I don't think so," Draco replied coldly. "In fact, I think the Greengrasses should remain exactly where they are, protected by their own wards, until an independent investigation team arrives tomorrow. One authorized directly by Minister Shacklebolt." The tension in the room was palpable. The two Aurors accompanying Robards had shifted positions subtly, hands moving toward wand holsters. Astoria's parents looked bewildered and frightened, while Astoria herself had moved closer to Draco, her expression resolute. "You've been misled, Mr. Malfoy," Robard said, his voice hardening. "Someone has fed you conspiracy theories to undermine the legitimate work of the Auror office. This is exactly the kind of disinformation campaign former Death Eater families have been mounting to avoid justified scrutiny." "That's not true," Astoria interjected. "The Malfoys have been rebuilding their reputation honestly since the war. Draco's international trading company employs dozens of people, including Muggleborns and half-bloods." Robards turned his cold gaze on her. "Miss Greengrass, your family's neutrality during the war won't protect you if you align yourself with known collaborators now." "Enough," Harry said, dropping his disillusionment charm as he stepped into the room. "It's over, Robards. We have Goyle's memory, testimonies from former Aurors, and the timing evidence connecting you to every attack. The minister has authorized your suspension pending investigation." Robard's expression flickered between shock and fury at Harry's appearance. The Aurors beside him drew their wands fully now, pointing them at Harry and Draco. "Potter," Robard spat. "I should have known you'd be involved. Always the hero, even when it means defending Death Eater scum." Defending justice, Harry corrected, his own wand held steadily at his side, not yet raised but ready. Something you seem to have forgotten. Narcissa remained disillusioned, slowly circling the room's perimeter to position herself behind Robards. Hermione, she noted, had done the same on the opposite side, ensuring they had the head Auror surrounded. Justice? Robards laughed bitterly. The Wisengamot pardoned monsters while the families of their victims received nothing but empty condolences. My brother and his wife were tortured for days before Mulciber finally killed them. Mulciber, who's serving a mere 10 years because he claimed imperious influence. So you decided to become judge, jury, and executioner? Harry challenged. To target families who had already been through the legal system. I decided to finish what the system was too weak to accomplish, Robard snarled, his facade of reasonableness completely abandoned now. To cleanse our society of Death Eater influence once and for all. The public supports us, they understand what you're too naive to see, Potter. Some people don't deserve mercy. That's not your decision to make, Harry replied steadily. Stand down, Robards. Order your men to lower their wands. We can resolve this without violence. For a moment, it seemed Robards might comply. Then his eyes narrowed, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod to his Aurors. Stupefy, one shouted, aiming at Draco. Chaos erupted. Harry deflected the stunning spell while Draco pulled Astoria behind a sofa for cover. Hermione revealed herself by casting a shield charm that protected the elder greengrasses from stray spell fire. Narcissa remained invisible, casting silent binding hexes that caught one of the Aurors unprepared, wrapping him in magical cords. Robards himself proved to be a formidable duelist, deflecting attacks from multiple directions while returning fire with deadly precision. A cutting curse grazed Harry's arm, drawing blood, while a blasting hex destroyed the sofa Draco and Astoria had taken cover behind, forcing them to scramble for new protection. Behind you! Draco shouted as the second Auror circled around, aiming at Harry's back. Narcissa dropped her disillusionment, crying, Protego, just as the Auror cast what appeared to be a bone-breaking curse. Her shield deflected it back at the caster, who howled in pain as his own spell shattered his wand arm. Robards, seeing his allies neutralized, turned his full attention to Harry. You could have been great, Potter, he hissed, sending a barrage of spells that Harry barely blocked. Instead you'll die defending Death Eater spawn. You're wrong, Harry replied, countering with his own series of hexes. About me, about justice, about all of it. They dueled with increasing intensity, magic crackling around them as spells collided mid-air. Narcissa, Draco, and Hermione moved to form a protective circle around the greengrasses, unable to assist Harry directly without risking hitting him in the crossfire. Robards was skilled, but Harry was younger, faster, and battle-tested in ways few wizards could match. Gradually, he forced the head Auror onto the defensive, his spells coming in unpredictable combinations that left Robards struggling to counter effectively. Expelliarmus! Harry finally shouted, putting the full force of his magic behind the signature spell. Robards' wand flew from his grasp, and he stumbled backward, disarmed but not defeated. With a snarl of rage, he pulled something from his pocket, a small object that gleamed in the room's light. One of the Hallows Justice coins. Portus Maxima, he bellowed, activating what was clearly an illegal portkey. The coin glowed blue, but before Robards could escape, Narcissa acted instinctively. Accio coin, she cried, summoning the portkey directly from his hand. The coin flew toward her, its magic still active. She deflected it with another quick spell, sending it harmlessly into a potted plant, which disappeared with a sharp crack. Robards howled in frustration as Harry quickly bound him with enchanted restraints. You'll regret this, he spat. All of you. The public will never accept Death Eaters walking free while their victims still suffer. The public will know the truth, Hermione said firmly, already sending a Patronus message to Percy. That you betrayed your oath as an Auror to pursue personal vengeance. Within minutes, the drawing room filled with ministry officials, Percy leading a contingent of carefully selected aurors, followed by Tiberius Ogden representing the Wiesengemot. Statements were taken, evidence secured, the captured conspirators removed to ministry holding cells. Through it all, Narcissa observed her son, who hadn't left Astoria Greengrass's side since the fighting ended. The young woman leaned against him with comfortable familiarity, their hands intertwined as they spoke quietly together. More than a business arrangement, indeed, she murmured to herself. "What's that?" Harry asked, appearing beside her after giving his official statement. She nodded toward the young couple. "It seems my son has been less than forthcoming about his relationship with Miss Greengrass." Harry followed her gaze, a smile touching his lips. "Ah. That explains his immediate reaction when we mentioned the Greengrasses were in danger." "Indeed." Narcissa hesitated, then added softly, "Thank you, Harry. For everything you've done these past days. For protecting us when you had no obligation to do so." "I think we're well past obligation at this point," he replied, his green eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Don't you?" Before she could respond, Percy approached them, looking exhausted but satisfied. "It's done. Robards is in custody, along with Williamson and 6 other aurors implicated in Hallow's justice activities. The minister has been notified and is cutting his trip short to deal with the fallout." "What happens now?" Narcissa asked. "A full investigation, followed by trials," Percy explained. "And a comprehensive review of the cases involving families targeted by Hallow's justice. The minister is committed to ensuring no further vigilante actions occur." "And the Malfoys?" Harry asked the question Narcissa had been afraid to voice. "Will they receive protection until this is fully resolved?" Percy nodded. "Of course. All targeted families will be offered ministry security until we're certain all Hallows Justice members have been identified and apprehended." Relief washed over Narcissa. The immediate danger had passed. Robards was in custody, his conspiracy exposed. Her family was safe, not just temporarily, but with official protection and recognition of the wrongs done to them. As the evening progressed, the Greengrass drawing room transformed from battlefield to impromptu command center. Ministry officials came and went, reports were filed, statements taken. Draco and Astoria remained inseparable, while Hermione coordinated with Percy on next steps. Harry, Narcissa noticed, never strayed far from her side, a protective presence that felt increasingly natural, even right. When Mrs. Greengrass finally insisted on providing refreshments for everyone, they found themselves momentarily alone in a quiet corner of the garden, where they had stepped out for fresh air. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds. The silence between them was comfortable, laden with unspoken thoughts rather than awkwardness. "What will you do now?" Harry asked finally. "Return to the manor? Join Draco in Geneva?" Narcissa considered the question, watching moonlight play across the garden's fountains. "I'm not sure. The manor holds too many painful memories, yet it's been my home for so long. And Geneva?" She shook her head slightly. "That's Draco's future, not mine." "You could build something new," Harry suggested quietly. "A different life, separate from the Malfoy name and legacy." "At my age," she gave a soft laugh. "It's rather late for fresh starts." "I don't think it's ever too late," he said, turning to face her fully. "If these past days have taught me anything, it's that people can surprise you, can change in ways you never expected." The intensity in his gaze made her heart flutter embarrassingly. "People like me, you mean?" "People like both of us," he corrected. "I never imagined I'd find myself working alongside Narcissa Malfoy, much less." He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Much less what, Harry?" she prompted gently. Instead of answering with words, he stepped closer, one hand tentatively reaching up to touch her cheek. When she didn't pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her, softly, questioningly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw. Narcissa did the opposite, her hands rising to rest on his shoulders as she returned the kiss with a warmth that surprised even herself. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, she found herself smiling. "Well," she murmured. "That was unexpected." "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" Harry asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath his question. "Definitely good," she assured him, then sobered slightly. "But also complicated. There are many who would not approve." "When have I ever cared about approval?" he pointed out with a crooked smile. "Besides, we've faced death together. I think we can handle a few raised eyebrows." Narcissa laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "You make it sound so simple." "Not simple," Harry acknowledged. "But worthwhile, I think." From inside the house, Draco's voice called for them, breaking the moment. Reality intruded once more, there were still statements to complete, arrangements to make, a future to plan. But as they walked back inside together, Harry's hand brushing against hers in a gesture that felt both new and comfortingly familiar, Narcissa realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in decades, she was looking forward to tomorrow not with dread or resignation, but with genuine hope. Whatever came next, whether rebuilding her relationship with Andromeda, supporting Draco's evident affection for Astoria, or exploring this unexpected connection with Harry, she would face it on her own terms, as herself. Not as Lucius Malfoy's wife or Draco's mother or the last guardian of pureblood tradition, but simply as Narcissa. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was, she realized with quiet certainty, exactly what she needed. As they rejoined the others, Draco gave them a knowing look that suggested he'd observed their brief absence and drawn his own conclusions. But instead of the disgust or outrage she might have expected, his expression held something closer to resigned amusement, and perhaps a hint of approval. "Percy says we're free to go once we've signed the final statements," he informed them. "Astoria has invited us to stay here tonight, if that's acceptable." "Of course," Narcissa agreed, studying her son's face. "Though perhaps we should discuss your own previously undisclosed arrangements with Miss Greengrass." Draco had the grace to look sheepish. "It's complicated. Isn't it always?" Harry observed with a grin, exchanging a glance with Narcissa that sent warmth spreading through her chest. Yes, she thought, watching her son flush under their combined scrutiny. Complicated indeed, but for once, that complexity felt like possibility rather than burden. A thawing of frozen ground, making way for something new to grow. Chapter 3, Phoenix Rising. Absolutely not. Harry paced the length of Minister Shacklebolt's office, running his hands through his already messy hair. "It's too dangerous. We've already caught Robards and his core group. Why risk anything more?" Kingsley Shacklebolt, recently returned from the International Confederation Summit, leaned forward at his desk. "Because we haven't caught everyone, Harry. Our interrogations suggest at least a dozen more Hallows Justice members remain at large, some within the ministry itself." 3 days had passed since the confrontation at the Greengrass estate. 3 days of interrogations, evidence gathering, and the gradual unraveling of Robard's network. Narcissa stood by the window, watching Harry with a mixture of concern and admiration. He'd barely slept, working tirelessly to ensure every detail of the case was properly documented. "What exactly are you proposing, Minister?" she asked, turning from the window. "A controlled operation," Kingsley replied. "Using Malfoy Manor as bait." Draco, who had been silently fuming in a corner chair, finally exploded. "Our family home isn't bait. It's already been attacked once. The East Wing is still uninhabitable." "Which makes it the perfect lure," Percy Weasley chimed in from his position beside the minister's desk. "The remaining members of Hallows Justice will be desperate to prove themselves, to show the cause continues despite Robard's arrest. A seemingly vulnerable Malfoy Manor, with reports of the family returning to collect valuables." Narcissa understood the strategic logic, even as she bristled at the thought of her home being used this way. "You want to draw them into a trap." "Precisely," Kingsley confirmed. We'll have aurors, thoroughly vetted ones, positioned throughout the property. When they strike, we'll capture them all at once. And you need us as part of this charade, Harry concluded, his expression thunderous. We need authentic bait, Percy clarified, looking uncomfortable. The reports must appear credible. If the Malfoys are returning to their home, they wouldn't do so without protection. Given recent events, that protection would logically be you, Harry. Narcissa caught Harry's eye, a silent conversation passing between them. Despite their newfound closeness, still tentative, still unexplored beyond that single kiss in the greengrass garden, they hadn't discussed what came next. Everything had happened so quickly: Robards' arrest, the Ministry investigation, the public shock when the prophet finally reported the true nature of Hallow's justice. "I'll do it," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. "If it means ending this threat completely, I'll participate." "Mother!" Draco protested. "It's sensible," she countered. "We need our home restored, Draco. More importantly, we need to ensure these vigilantes can't threaten other families." Harry stopped pacing, studying her face. "If you're willing, then I'm in too. But I want complete control over the security arrangements. No compromises." Kingsley nodded. "Granted. You'll have whatever resources you need." "I want Hermione's involvement too," Harry added. "She knows counter-surveillance charms better than anyone in the DMLE. Miss Granger has already volunteered," Percy said with a hint of pride. "She's developing specialized detection wards as we speak." Draco stood abruptly. "If this is happening, I'm participating too. It's my home as well." Narcissa felt a surge of maternal pride, tempered with worry. Her son had changed so much in the past week, standing alongside Harry rather than against him, thinking beyond his own safety. And of course, there was his relationship with Astoria Greengrass, now openly acknowledged, another sign of his evolution. "Very well," Kingsley agreed. "We'll proceed tomorrow. That gives us 24 hours to prepare and plant the necessary information." After finalizing details, they left the minister's office, Harry walking beside Narcissa while Draco strode ahead, still clearly unhappy with the plan. "Are you sure about this?" Harry asked quietly, his hand briefly touching the small of her back. "No one would blame you for refusing." "I'm sure," she replied. "The Manor has been a prison in many ways, dominated by Lucius's choices, then the Dark Lord's occupation, now these attacks. Perhaps it's fitting that it serve one last purpose before I decide its future." Harry's eyebrows rose. "You're thinking of leaving permanently?" "I'm considering many things," Narcissa said carefully. They hadn't discussed what their tentative relationship might mean long-term. Everything felt fragile, new, complicated by their history and the 24-year age gap between them. Before Harry could respond, they reached the ministry atrium, where a crowd of reporters immediately surged forward. "Mr. Potter. Is it true you're personally protecting the Malfoy family?" "Mrs. Malfoy. How does it feel knowing your family was targeted by ministry officials? Are the rumors true that you've been staying at Harry Potter's home?" The barrage of questions hit like hexes. Narcissa maintained her composure through decades of practice, her expression revealing nothing as Harry stepped slightly in front of her, shielding her from the most aggressive journalists. "No comment at this time," he said firmly. "The ministry's investigation is ongoing." Rita Skeeter, her acid green quill hovering expectantly, pushed to the front. "Sources claim you and Mrs. Malfoy have grown quite close during this ordeal, Harry. Care to elaborate on the nature of your protection?" Narcissa felt heat rise to her cheeks even as she kept her expression neutral. Draco had doubled back at the commotion and now stood at her other side, his face darkening with anger at Skeeter's insinuation. "My mother nearly died in an attack orchestrated by corrupt officials," he snapped. "Show some respect. Interesting that you're defending her honor, Mr. Malfoy, when your own relationship with Astoria Greengrass has raised eyebrows," Skeeter countered, her smile predatory. "The children of opposing sides in the war," finding romance. Quite the story, unless overshadowed by an even more unlikely pairing. Harry's jaw tightened. That's enough. We have nothing further to say. He guided Narcissa through the crowd, Draco following closely, until they reached the designated apparition point. The moment they arrived at the small flat Harry had secured as temporary headquarters, Draco rounded on them. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he said, gesturing wildly. "It's not enough that we're risking our lives tomorrow, now we're fodder for gossip columns." "Draco," Narcissa began, but he cut her off. "Don't Draco me. I saw you two at the Greengrass estate. I'm not blind, mother." He turned to Harry. "And you, what exactly are your intentions here? My mother isn't some conquest to prove your magnanimity." "Draco." Narcissa's voice sharpened. "That's quite enough." Harry, to his credit, remained calm. "Your concern for your mother does you credit, Malfoy. But you're crossing a line." "Am I?" Draco challenged. 3 weeks ago, we were enemies. Now suddenly there's, whatever this is." He gestured between them. "Forgive me for questioning its authenticity." "You don't have to forgive anything," Harry replied evenly. "You don't even have to approve. But you will respect your mother's choices, just as she's respected yours regarding Astoria." The comparison silenced Draco momentarily. Narcissa seized the opportunity to take control of the situation. "This discussion can wait," she said firmly. "We have more urgent matters to address. Tomorrow's operation requires preparation, not squabbling." Both men had the grace to look chastened. Draco retreated to the small kitchen, muttering about making tea, while Harry moved to the table covered with Manor floor plans. "He's not entirely wrong," Narcissa said quietly, joining Harry at the table. "This is unconventional." Harry's expression softened. "Conventional has never worked out well for me." He hesitated, then added, "But if you're having second thoughts, I'm not," she interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "I'm just aware of the complications." His hand found hers under the table, a brief, reassuring touch. "We'll figure it out. After tomorrow." "After tomorrow," she agreed. The evening passed in intensive planning. Hermione arrived with specialized detection charms and updated wards. Ron Weasley, still clearly uncomfortable around the Malfoys but professional nonetheless, brought intelligence from the Auror office about potential suspects still at large. By midnight, they had a comprehensive strategy. Narcissa and Draco would openly return to the manor, ostensibly to recover family heirlooms before leaving the country. Harry and a select team would be concealed throughout the property. Once the vigilantes attacked, they would spring the trap. As the others departed, leaving Harry, Narcissa, and Draco alone in the flat, an awkward silence descended. Draco, after a moment's hesitation, grabbed his cloak. "I'm going to check on Astoria," he announced. "Her parents are still shaken by everything that's happened." "Of course," Narcissa nodded. "Give them my regards." After Draco left, Harry collapsed onto the sofa, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Will he be okay with this? He gestured vaguely between them. Narcissa sat beside him, closer than propriety might dictate. "Eventually. He's protective, and this is unexpected for everyone, including us." "Especially us," Harry agreed with a tired smile. He hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" "After everything we've been through, I think personal questions are permitted," she replied dryly. "Why me? You could have anyone, wealthy purebloods, distinguished wizards your own age. Why risk all this complication?" The question caught her off guard with its directness. She considered deflecting, but something in his expression, vulnerability beneath the confidence, made her answer honestly. "You see me," she said simply. "Not Narcissa Malfoy, not a Death Eater's wife, not Draco's mother. Just me. Do you know how rare that is?" Harry nodded slowly. I think I do, actually. People have been seeing Harry Potter instead of just Harry my whole life. Precisely. She smiled faintly. And as for the age difference, perhaps I'm simply tired of convention. Conventional choices led me to the Dark Lord's side, to a marriage that became a prison, to a life dictated by others' expectations. Rebelling in your 40s, Harry teased gently. Very scandalous. I'm 47, thank you very much, she corrected, returning his smile. And yes, perhaps there is an element of rebellion. But there's also. She paused, searching for words. Connection. Understanding. Things I never expected to find with anyone, let alone you. Harry reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. For what it's worth, I feel it too. And I don't care what anyone else thinks. Easy to say now, she cautioned. Harder when the prophet runs headlines about you consorting with a Death Eater's wife old enough to be your mother. Let them, Harry said with unexpected fierceness. I've spent my whole life in the spotlight. At least this time it's for something I've chosen, not something forced on me. The conviction in his voice warmed something inside her. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them to kiss him softly. He responded immediately, one hand rising to cup her cheek while the other remained twined with hers. Unlike their first kiss in the greengrass garden, this one deepened, hesitation giving way to growing certainty. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Harry rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he murmured. Not for. I mean, just to sleep. I don't want to be alone, not before tomorrow. The vulnerability in the request touched her deeply. Neither do I, she admitted. They settled in Harry's small bedroom, the intimacy of lying beside him both strange and comforting. As Harry's breathing eventually deepened into sleep, his arm draped protectively across her waist, Narcissa remained awake, contemplating the extraordinary turns her life had taken. 3 weeks ago, she had been alone in a decaying manor, a remnant of a failed cause, her life stretching emptily before her. Now she lay beside Harry Potter, the symbol of everything she had once opposed, feeling more alive, more herself, than she had in decades. Whatever tomorrow brought, she realized with quiet certainty, she was already transforming, a phoenix rising from the ashes of her former life. Dawn broke misty and cool over Malfoy Manor. Narcissa stood at the property's edge, surveying the imposing structure that had been her home for 25 years. Despite the early hour, her appearance was immaculate, elegant robes, perfect hair, the Malfoy mask firmly in place. For this performance to work, she needed to look exactly as the vigilantes would expect, proud, unbroken, the pure-blood matriarch returning to claim her birthright. Beside her, Draco mirrored her composure, though she could sense his tension. He had returned late the previous night, avoiding any discussion of where he'd found her that morning, emerging from Harry's bedroom, wearing borrowed clothes. Some conversations would need to wait. Ready? Harry asked, visible only to them thanks to specialized aura communication charms. Somewhere under his invisibility cloak, he was coordinating the dozen hidden operatives positioned throughout the grounds. Yes, Narcissa replied. Let's proceed. With deliberate confidence, they approached the manor's damaged entrance. The massive doors had been temporarily repaired but still showed evidence of the violent break-in. Narcissa waved her wand in a complex pattern that acknowledged her as the lady of the house, and the doors swung inward. Home sweet home, Draco muttered sarcastically as they entered the cavernous entrance hall. Focus on the east wing first, Narcissa said loudly, for the benefit of anyone who might be watching or listening. The family jewels and your great-grandfather's manuscripts should be salvageable. They moved through the manor with calculated casualness, discussing valuable items to recover and reminiscing about family history just loudly enough to be overheard. Occasionally, Harry would give them updates through the communication charm, all clear at the west perimeter, or movement in the gardens, just foxes, but otherwise, the house remained eerily quiet. By mid-morning, Narcissa began to wonder if the trap had failed. Perhaps the information hadn't reached the right people, or they'd been too cautious to act. She and Draco had methodically worked through several rooms, actually packing family treasures into the magically expanded trunks they'd brought. If nothing else, the exercise was proving practical. "This is pointless," Draco said under his breath as they entered the Manor's library. "They're not coming." "Patience," she counseled, running her fingers along the spines of ancient tomes. "We've only been here 3 hours. Movement at the North Gardens, Harry's disembodied voice suddenly reported. 2 figures approaching under disillusionment. Hermione's detection wards just flagged them. Narcissa's pulse quickened, but she continued browsing the bookshelves as if nothing had changed. Draco, to his credit, maintained their charade, complaining loudly about the damp damaging the rarer volumes. "For more at the east entrance," Harry updated. "And another 2 coming through the cellars. They're coordinating, all approaching simultaneously." "The Greengrass collection would fetch a good price," Narcissa said clearly, gesturing toward a glass-fronted case containing illuminated manuscripts. "And they're portable enough for immediate transport." Draco moved to the case, making a show of examining the books. "Geneva dealers would pay top galleon for these. Historical value to neutral families is high right now." They continued this performance as Harry whispered updates about their visitors' positions. The vigilantes were being cautious, moving slowly through the manor, clearly searching for traps or alarms. The tension built with each passing minute, Narcissa's every sense alert despite her outwardly calm demeanor. "They're converging on the library," Harry murmured finally. 6 outside the doors, 2 more covering the rear entrance. "Ready yourselves." Narcissa moved casually to position herself beside a sturdy bookcase that could provide cover. Draco did the same on the opposite side of the room, still loudly discussing book values. They had agreed that when the attack came, they would defend themselves convincingly but not too effectively. They needed to appear vulnerable enough to draw all the assailants into the open. The library doors burst open with a bang. 4 masked figures rushed in, wands raised, while 2 more covered the second entrance. Unlike the previous attackers, these wore full face coverings, silver masks reminiscent of Death Eaters, but adorned with the Deathly Hallows symbol across the forehead. "Stupefy!" Draco shouted, firing a spell that deliberately missed its target by inches. Narcissa responded with her own carefully ineffective shield charm as spells flew toward her. "Protego! Draco, run!" "Nowhere to run, Mrs. Malfoy," one of the masked figures called. The voice was female, cultured, vaguely familiar. "Justice comes for all who serve the Dark Lord." "I was acquitted," Narcissa replied, dodging a hex and returning fire with a mild stinging jinx. "By the Wizengamot itself." "A corrupted process," another attacker spat. "Money and influence buying freedom while real victims suffered." The duel intensified, Narcissa and Draco gradually allowing themselves to be backed into a corner, seemingly overwhelmed by superior numbers. The attackers grew bolder, advancing into the center of the library, their spells becoming more aggressive. "Where's your protector now?" taunted the female leader. "Has the great Harry Potter abandoned you already?" "Right here, actually," came Harry's voice as he dropped his invisibility cloak directly behind them. "Aurors, move in." Chaos erupted. The hidden Aurors revealed themselves from concealed positions throughout the library. Spells flew in every direction as the trapped vigilantes realized they'd been set up. 2 were immediately stunned, dropping unconscious to the floor. The others fought with the desperation of cornered animals. Freed from the need to appear vulnerable, Narcissa demonstrated why she had once been considered the most talented of the Black Sisters after Bellatrix. Her wand work was precise, elegant, and devastatingly effective. A complex binding spell wrapped around one attacker like a python, while a silent impedimenta froze another mid-lunge. Across the room, Draco fought with similar skill, his style more aggressive than his mother's but equally effective. He and Ron Weasley, in a turn of events that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier, worked in surprising tandem, covering each other's flanks as they subdued a particularly fierce opponent. Harry confronted the female leader, their duel a blur of light and movement. Despite her obvious skill, she was outmatched. With a precisely aimed Expelliarmus, Harry sent her wand flying across the room. As two Aurors moved to restrain her, he reached forward and pulled off her mask. "Pansy Parkinson," he said, genuine surprise in his voice. "You're behind Hallow's justice?" The young woman's face contorted with hatred. "My father lost everything because of families like the Malfoys. His reputation, his business, our home, all gone because of his association with Death Eaters who walked free. So you decided to become exactly what you claimed to hate?" Narcissa asked, approaching slowly. "Vigilantes attacking homes, threatening lives. We delivered justice the ministry was too weak to provide," Pansy spat. "Robards understood that. He lost family too." "Robards used you," Harry said flatly. "He manipulated your genuine grievances to pursue his own vendetta. Look around, Pansy, you're attacking former friends. Draco was your classmate. Draco's family destroyed mine." Tears of fury streaked down Pansy's face. "While he builds his fancy new business in Switzerland, my father drinks himself to death in a one-room flat in Knockturn Alley." Narcissa felt a pang of genuine regret. She remembered Percival Parkinson, a weak man who had followed Lucius into the Dark Lord's orbit, not out of conviction but from fear and greed. His family had indeed suffered for his choices, just as hers had. "The cycle has to end somewhere, Miss Parkinson," she said quietly. "Revenge only creates more victims, more grievances, more pain." "Spare me your wisdom, Mrs. Malfoy," Pansy sneered. "You only found conscience when your side lost." As the Aurors led Pansy and her co-conspirators away, the library fell quiet. The operation had been successful, 8 vigilantes captured without serious injuries to either side. The last remnants of Hallow's justice would soon be in ministry custody. "You were brilliant," Harry said, coming to stand beside Narcissa. "That binding spell was something else." The noble and most ancient House of Black had some useful combat applications in its family grimoire, she replied with a small smile. "Not all dark, contrary to popular belief." Draco joined them, looking surprisingly pleased despite the morning's danger. "Well, that's done. Can we please leave this mausoleum now?" Narcissa gazed around the library, with its centuries of Malfoy history contained in leather-bound volumes and glass cases. For the first time, she saw it objectively, not as the heart of a proud lineage, but as a repository of choices, some honorable, many not. "Actually," she said slowly, "I'd like to make one more stop before we go." She led them through the manor to the family tapestry room, where generations of Malfoys stared down from animated portraits and the family tree spread across an entire wall, golden threads connecting names and dates back 15 generations. "Mother?" Draco questioned, watching as she studied the tapestry intently. "I've been thinking about legacy," Narcissa explained, her fingers tracing the embroidered lines. "What we inherit, what we pass on, what we choose to carry forward." Harry stood quietly at the doorway, giving her space while remaining supportively present. Narcissa appreciated his intuitive understanding of what this moment meant to her. "The Malfoy name has stood for purity, tradition, power," she continued. "But those values led us to the Dark Lord's side, to choices that nearly destroyed our family. Perhaps it's time for redefinition." "What are you saying?" Draco asked cautiously. "I'm saying the manor shouldn't be abandoned or sold to strangers." She turned to face her son. "It should be transformed. Repurposed. Perhaps as a research center, or a school for magical disciplines overlooked by Hogwarts, or a sanctuary for those affected by the wars." Draco looked stunned. "You want to turn Malfoy Manor into a public institution?" "I want it to stand for something better than it has," Narcissa replied simply. "Something that acknowledges the past without being chained to it. Something that might, in some small way, balance the harm done in the Malfoy name." A complex mix of emotions crossed Draco's face, surprise, uncertainty, and finally, a growing understanding. You're serious about starting over, aren't you? Not just saying it. I am. She glanced toward Harry, who watched her with undisguised admiration. Some changes are prompted by outside forces, like attacks or wars. Others must come from within. I've lived too long allowing circumstances to dictate my path. Draco followed her gaze to Harry, then back to his mother. After a long moment, he sighed. The East Wing would make a decent library for public access. And the ballroom could be converted to lecture space, I suppose. The tentative acceptance in his voice brought unexpected tears to Narcissa's eyes. We don't have to decide everything today. But I wanted you to understand my thinking. I do, he said quietly. And while I still think this, he waved a hand between her and Harry, is completely mad, I want you to be happy, Mother. After everything, you deserve that much. Before she could respond, Ron Weasley appeared in the doorway beside Harry. All suspects secured, he reported. Ministry transports arrived to take them in. We should go give our statements, Harry said. Make this official. As they moved to leave the tapestry room, Narcissa paused for one last look at the Malfoy family tree. For centuries, it had grown in only one direction, the narrow path of pureblood succession. Perhaps now, under her stewardship, it could branch in new, unexpected ways. The ministry was chaos when they arrived. News of the operation had leaked, and journalists packed the atrium, shouting questions as Aurors escorted the masked prisoners through to the holding cells. Kingsley had ordered a public perp walk, a calculated move to show the wizarding community that justice was being served, transparently and without special treatment. Mrs. Malfoy. How does it feel to help capture those who targeted your family? Mr. Potter. Is it true you personally led the operation at Malfoy Manor? Draco Malfoy. Will you be returning to England permanently or continuing your business in Switzerland? The questions came from all directions as they made their way through the crowd. Narcissa maintained her dignity, neither rushing nor acknowledging the more invasive inquiries. Harry walked beside her, close but not touching, while Draco forged ahead, clearing a path toward the elevators. In the minister's office, they found a smaller but equally intense gathering. Kingsley sat behind his desk, Percy standing at attention nearby. Hermione was organizing evidence files, while several Wisengamot members, including Tiberius Ogden, conversed in low voices by the window. Augusta Longbottom occupied an armchair in the corner, her expression severe but not hostile as Narcissa entered. Excellent work, all of you, Kingsley said, rising to greet them. 8 captured, including several we hadn't previously identified. Combined with Robart's group, we believe that's the entirety of Hallow's justice. Miss Parkinson's involvement was unexpected, Percy noted, checking a list. Her family suffered financially after the war but had no direct ties to Death Eaters. Grief and resentment take many forms, Hermione observed quietly. Not all victims of the war wore obvious scars. The comment hung in the air, a reminder that the conflict's damage extended far beyond battlefield casualties. Narcissa thought again of Percival Parkinson drinking himself to death in Knockturn Alley while his daughter plotted revenge. What happens now? Harry asked, accepting the cup of tea Kingsley offered. Trials, within the month, the minister replied. Given the evidence, convictions are virtually certain. But we're taking a dual approach, justice and healing. Those convicted will serve sentences, but they'll also participate in reconciliation programs. We can't afford another cycle of vengeance breeding new hatred. And what of the families who were targeted? Draco asked. The Greengrasses, the Parkinsons who weren't involved, the others. Reparations where property was damaged, Percy answered. And a comprehensive review of all cases from the war, ensuring fair treatment regardless of which side families were perceived to be on. That's surprisingly enlightened, Draco commented. Kingsley smiled slightly. We learn from our mistakes, Mr. Malfoy. The Ministry's handling of the aftermath of both wars contributed to the environment that allowed Hallow's justice to flourish. We won't repeat that error. The meeting continued with statements taken, evidence catalogued, and plans made for public announcements. Throughout, Narcissa was struck by the professionalism with which she was treated, not as a former enemy, but as a citizen deserving protection and respect. It was a marked change from her experiences in the years following the war. As the gathering began to disperse, Augusta Longbottom approached Narcissa, her cane tapping sharply against the floor. "Mrs. Malfoy," she acknowledged with a stiff nod. "Madam Longbottom," Narcissa replied carefully, aware of the painful history between their families, specifically, Bellatrix's torture of Augusta's son and daughter-in-law. "My grandson speaks highly of Mr. Potter's judgment," the elderly witch said without preamble. "He believes if Potter trusts you, there must be substance to justify it." Narcissa wasn't sure how to respond to this oblique reference to her relationship with Harry, which had apparently become common knowledge despite their discretion. "Neville is very generous," she said finally. "His courage during the Battle of Hogwarts was remarkable." "Yes, well." Augusta sniffed. "The boy takes after his parents in that regard." She fixed Narcissa with a penetrating stare. "I will never forgive what your sister did to my family. But Neville has taught me that holding new generations accountable for old sins only perpetuates suffering." The unexpected olive branch, not quite forgiveness, but an acknowledgement of the need to move forward, left Narcissa momentarily speechless. "Thank you," she said simply. "Your grandson does you credit." Augusta nodded once more before moving away. As she left, Harry approached, having observed the exchange from across the room. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Narcissa replied, still processing the interaction. "Augusta Longbottom has more wisdom than I gave her credit for." Before Harry could respond, the office door burst open, and Rita Skeeter slipped in, her photographer right behind her. "Minister!" she exclaimed with fake surprise. "What a coincidence finding you all here. Perhaps you'd care to comment on today's operations? And on the rumors regarding Mr. Potter's close protection of the Malfoy family?" Kingsley's expression darkened. "Ms. Skeeter, this is a closed meeting. Security." But the damage was done. The photographer's camera flashed repeatedly, capturing Harry and Narcissa standing close together, their body language revealing more than either had intended to display publicly. "The wizarding world has questions, Minister," Skeeter persisted as security wizards appeared to escort her out. "Is this the beginning of a policy shift? Former Death Eaters not just pardoned but welcomed? Dark families rehabilitated through personal connections to heroes?" Her gaze fixed pointedly on Harry and Narcissa. "That's enough," Harry said firmly. "This isn't a story, Rita. It's people's lives." "Everything about Harry Potter is a story, dear boy," Skeeter replied with a predatory smile as she was led away. "Especially when he's romantically involved with Narcissa Malfoy. The readers will be absolutely riveted." After she was removed, an awkward silence fell over the room. The secret, if it had ever truly been one, was now irrevocably public. Narcissa felt all eyes on them, reactions ranging from Hermione's resigned concern to Percy's stunned disbelief to Kingsley's carefully neutral expression. "Well," Draco said dryly, breaking the silence. "That should make tomorrow's prophet interesting reading." Harry ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Narcissa now recognized as signaling his discomfort. "I'm sorry," he said quietly to her. "I never wanted you exposed to this kind of scrutiny." "I'm hardly unfamiliar with public attention, Harry," she replied with more composure than she felt. "Though usually not of this particular variety." Kingsley cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should conclude for today. The formal announcements about Hallow's justice can proceed tomorrow, after everyone's had rest and preparation for the public response." The meeting disbanded quickly after that, people departing with varying degrees of awkwardness. Hermione gave Harry a quick hug and whispered something that made him nod gratefully. Draco announced he was returning to the Greengrass estate, where Astoria was waiting for news of the operation. That left Harry and Narcissa standing somewhat uncertainly in the minister's empty office. "I suppose we should discuss what happens next," Harry said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Indeed," Narcissa agreed. "Though perhaps not here." They left together, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed them through the ministry corridors. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Whitehall as they walked in companionable silence, neither ready yet to apparate away. "I meant what I said at the Manor," Narcissa finally spoke. "About transformation. New beginnings." Harry nodded. "The research center idea is brilliant, actually. A way to honor the better parts of your family's legacy while creating something new." "I wasn't just talking about the Manor," she said softly. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I know." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the bustle of London continuing around them, oblivious to the significance of what was passing between them. "The publicity will be brutal," Narcissa warned. "The age difference alone would raise eyebrows. Add our history, the war, my family connections." "I don't care," Harry interrupted. "I've never cared what the papers say about me. And I'm certainly not going to start letting Rita Skeeter dictate my happiness." "Happiness," she repeated, testing the word. "Is that what this is?" His smile was answer enough, warming his green eyes in a way that made her heart race embarrassingly. "For me, yes. Despite everything, or maybe because of it, I'm happier with you than I've been in, well, possibly ever." The simple honesty of his declaration touched something deep within her. This wasn't calculated flattery or political maneuvering, languages she'd spoken fluently for decades. This was Harry, direct and genuine as always. "There will be obstacles," she cautioned, though her resolve was weakening. "Your friends, my son, society at large." "Hermione already knows," Harry countered. "She figured it out days ago. Ron will be shocked but he'll come around. Draco's made his peace with it, more or less. And society can gossip all it wants, we've both survived worse than rumors." "True enough," Narcissa acknowledged with a small smile. "The question is," Harry continued, suddenly serious, "what do you want, Narcissa? Not what's expected or what's easy or what makes sense on paper. What do you want for yourself?" The directness of the question stripped away her remaining defenses. What did she want? For so long, her desires had been sublimated to the needs of others, her parents, Lucius, the Dark Lord, Draco. She'd almost forgotten how to want things purely for herself. "I want to rediscover who I am beyond the roles I've played," she said slowly. "I want to create something meaningful from the ruins of my former life. And..." She met his gaze directly. "I want to see where this unexpected connection between us might lead, despite every logical reason to avoid it." Harry's face broke into a grin that made him look younger than his 23 years. "That's what I want too. The illogical, complicated, wonderful possibility of us." Without caring who might see, he leaned forward and kissed her there on the London street, not the tentative kiss of the Greengrass garden or the private moment in his flat, but a public declaration of intent. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Narcissa laughed softly. "Well, if Rita didn't have confirmation before, she certainly does now." "Good," Harry said with surprising vehemence. "Let's save her the trouble of making up details." Hand in hand, they continued walking, discussing practical matters, where they would stay tonight, how to respond to the inevitable news stories, next steps for the Malfoy Manor transformation project. The ease of their conversation, flowing from serious topics to lighter moments and back again, reinforced Narcissa's growing certainty that this unlikely connection was worth pursuing, whatever complications it might bring. Later that evening, they sat on the small balcony of Harry's flat, watching the sunset paint London's skyline in shades of gold and crimson. A bottle of elf-made wine stood half-empty between them, their dinner plates pushed aside. "I received an owl from Andromeda," Narcissa mentioned, sipping her wine. She's invited us both to lunch this weekend. Apparently, Teddy has been asking about the pretty lady with the yellow hair since our meeting. Harry smiled. He's a perceptive kid. Gets that from his grandmother. Speaking of perceptive. Narcissa hesitated. Draco mentioned something interesting before he left for the greengrasses. He's considering expanding his import business to include a research division, specifically focused on adapting magical plants for healing purposes. That sounds promising, Harry observed. Why is it interesting? Because he suggested locating it at the Manor, as part of the transformation project. His exact words were, "If Mother's determined to reinvent herself, the least I can do is contribute." Harry reached for her hand across the small table. That's huge, coming from Draco. He's accepting your choices, all of them. Conditionally, Narcissa amended with a smile. He also said if you hurt me, he'll find creative uses for those exotic poisons he imports. Fair enough, Harry laughed. I'd expect nothing less from a protective son. As darkness fell, they moved inside, settling comfortably on the sofa. The day's events had left them both exhausted but too wired to sleep. Harry had turned on the wizarding wireless, which was reporting on the Hallows Justice arrests without yet mentioning any personal connections between the key players. That will change by morning, Narcissa predicted, leaning against Harry's shoulder. Probably, he agreed, his arm around her. Does it bother you? Truly. She considered the question carefully. Not in the way you might think. I've lived my entire life constrained by what others expected of me, the perfect daughter, the suitable wife, the loyal supporter, the devoted mother. The idea of choosing something solely because it brings me joy, regardless of propriety or expectation, it's rather liberating. Harry tightened his arm around her. You deserve joy, Narcissa. After everything, you deserve to choose your own path. As do you, she replied softly. You've spent your life fulfilling a destiny others created for you, the boy who lived, the chosen one, the savior of the wizarding world. Perhaps it's time you lived for yourself as well. I think I'm starting to, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. They sat in comfortable silence, the wireless playing softly in the background. Outside, London continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to the small miracle occurring in one flat among millions, two people who should never have found common ground, much less affection, discovering in each other something neither had dared to seek. What now? Narcissa asked eventually, the question encompassing far more than their immediate plans. Harry considered for a moment. Now we live. We transform the Manor. We deal with the Prophet's headlines and Rita's ridiculous articles. We have lunch with your sister and spend time with Teddy. We figure out how to balance your life in Wiltshire with mine in London. We make mistakes and fix them and argue and reconcile and build something neither of us expected. That sounds wonderfully ordinary, Narcissa observed. After the lives we've both had, ordinary might be the greatest adventure yet, Harry replied with a smile. Narcissa turned in his arms to kiss him properly, marveling at how natural it felt, how right, despite every reason it shouldn't. They were an impossible pairing by any conventional standard, the pure-blood aristocrat and the half-blood hero, the former Death Eater's wife and the champion of the light, the elegant society matron and the young Auror still finding his way. And yet, as Harry deepened the kiss, his hands threading gently through her hair with a reverence that made her heart ache, Narcissa knew she wouldn't trade this impossible connection for all the propriety in the wizarding world. She had spent decades living as others expected. Now, against all odds, she had found someone who encouraged her to live as she chose. Whatever came next, public scrutiny, family adjustments, the long process of reinvention, they would face it together, two unlikely allies who had somehow become so much more. The phoenix of legend burns to ash only to rise renewed, transformed by the very fire that consumed it. As Narcissa Malfoy nestled in Harry Potter's arms, she understood that transformation at last, not as a theoretical rebirth, but as the very real, very human process of finding oneself anew when all seems lost. She had fallen, yes. But in falling, she had found the courage to rise again, on her own terms, toward a future bright with unexpected possibility. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.